Chapter 1743. A demon lord had died just like that, without any dignity. Now, a high-level demon lord was no longer a strong opponent for Bai Xiaowen. If he had the chi fostering technique, the power of his origin lightning would be enough to heavily injure a high-level demon lord. However, heavily injuring did not mean killing, and the enemy could possibly dodge it. Using two spiritual energy concretions, one of them would complete the binding, while the other would complete the killing. It was much more efficient, and he could also get rid of a group of demon minions. Moreover, the black whip and the black spiritual energy spear just now were formed by the spiritual energy of the two large skeleton formations. Bai Xiaowen only needed to guide them slightly, and the true inner force he used was not as much as the origin lightning. Commander-type evolvers, when they had a sufficient number of well-coordinated troops, could indeed unleash extremely powerful combat strength and challenge opponents above their level. After killing a demon lord, the elite vanguard team he led was also annihilated. Bai Xiaowen aimed at another demon lord and did the same thing, killing it once again. For a moment, the momentum of the demon lord's charge was thwarted. Facing two spiritual energy concretions with the power of a king, no matter how rash they were, they could not help but feel fear. Beep beep beep, the sound of the bone horn changed, and the demon army changed their formation. The two demon kings moved. The king of pride, Alleganti, and the king of pain, Sulfuron, the two large secondary demon kings, joined the battlefield. Beside them, they each led a powerful assault team made up of demon lords and chieftains, charging toward Bai Xiaowen's army formation. Because the Void Trap Immortal formation was constantly in operation, Bai Xiaowen's army was the only survival zone. Bai Xiaowen's target was still the demon lords, and he had to quickly reduce the number of demon lords. Whoosh! The spiritual energy concretion black whip whipped toward another demon lord. However, the black whip did not hit its target this time. A shadow flashed, and a skinny but tall figure appeared beside the demon lord. It was the king of pain, Sulfuron. He raised a skinny bone claw. The black whip followed suit, but only managed to wrap around one of Sulfuron's claws. It didn't restrict his movements. Sulfuron waved his hand and smashed apart the black spear that had shot over. That fiend lord escaped a calamity and hurriedly thanked Sulfuron. "Hide behind me and help me break the enemy's formation." Sulfuron's two rows of spider-like claws sprinted forward. The demon lords behind him agreed in unison. Looking at the demon king charging over, the militia formation showed a trace of fear. Although Sulfuron wasn't as powerful as Isman, he was still one of the 7 demon kings. In terms of status, he was an existence that stood at the peak of the entire darkness continent. Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath. Actually, he wasn't panicking because the black whip and black spear were only aimed at Lord-tier attacks. Their power hadn't been raised to its maximum. It must be known that the current 14 formations were all boosted by sacrifice to the flag and sacrifice to the god. Compared to when they'd annihilated the King of Pride's troops, their explosive power was at least 40% stronger. Moreover, Bai Xiaowen's specialization, spiritual force control, had risen to the expert level. His attacks against spiritual force concretions were no longer limited to the simple and crude bombardment of energy bullets. They had become more condensed and efficient. Since Sulfuron's speed is so astonishing, there's no way to ignore him. Undead formations number 1 and 2, open fire. The 3 heavenly kings sensed this and gave the order at the same time. Immediately, the first and second undead soldiers in the phalanx increased their spiritual power to the maximum. The 2 black spiritual force concretions instantly swelled, their bodies expanding by 40%. Their power was even more impressive, and they could now stand on equal footing with high-ranked king-level experts. Bai Xiaowen once again struck out with his black whip. This time, the black whip was nearly twice as thick as before. Under Bai Xiaowen's meticulous control, it split into many illusory black chains that enveloped Sulfuron. Although Sulfuron's speed was fast, he couldn't avoid such an area of effect attack. In the next second, his skinny body was entangled by the black whip. As if the black whip had a mind of its own, it quickly merged into one, and a powerful twisting force restrained Sulfuron's movements. Above the second formation of skeletons, a black spear of spiritual force formed. The power it contained was half as strong as the previous black spear. However, before the black spear shot out, Bai Xiaowen suddenly felt a wave of dizziness. The black spear he'd shot out actually lost its aim and slammed into a group of evil demons. Amidst the deafening explosion, the group of evil demons was blasted into the sky. Blood, flesh, and limbs flew everywhere. Spiritual interference. It's Alleghany's method. With Bai Xiaowen's current strength and the fact that he was at the core of the impregnable wall formation, an enemy who could successfully use spiritual interference on him had to be at least king level. Fortunately, Bai Xiaowen had a branch of immortal arts provided by the king-level classic, the Great Void Scripture, mental cultivation method. It had initially strengthened his spirit, toughness, which was why Alleghany's long-planned attack had failed. Tisk, Alleghany saw that Bai Xiaowen's figure had only swayed slightly before returning to normal. He could not help but curl his lips. She was secretly dissatisfied. The Silver King's order was to preserve Bai Xiaowen's complete soul. This prevented Alleghany from using many of his vicious soul attacks. In fact, this also protected Alleghany. If she were to go all out and trigger the counterattack mechanism of the Eye of Evolution, the counterattack force would be enough to make her suffer. Dealing with two high-level king-level powerhouses at the same time, relying only on the spiritual force concretions of two formations isn't enough. Bai Xiaowen's true inner force gushed out and connected with the other two formations of skeletons. Formations 3 and 4. Spiritual force concretions, rise. In the blink of an eye, another two spiritual force concretions were formed. A pitch-black giant, one holding a black blade and the other holding a giant stick, joined the battle. The four spiritual force concretions were dealing with two lesser demon lords at the same time, and Bai Xiaowen once again had the upper hand. After all, the four spiritual force giants were controlled by Bai Xiaowen alone, and their teamwork was seamless. On the other hand, the two lesser demon lords had never fought side by side and could only do their own thing. After being targeted by the Black Blade Giant and the Codex Giant, Alleghany, the King of Pride, did not have time to cast mental interference on Bai Xiaowen. He could only keep dodging the slashes of the Black Blade and the Codex Giant's magic spear. As for the aftershock of the slashes and spears, he did not care at all about them. Alleghany would only consume his dark energy to resist the attacks that he could not dodge. The two demon lords were caught in a bitter battle, and naturally, they could not care about the other demons. One by one, the demon lords and demon leaders were killed by the aftershock of the four spiritual force giants' attacks. Chapter 1744. This human known as Christos does have some skills. It's not strange for Dafar to die in his hands. Silver King Isman sat on his throne and watched the bloody battlefield. I sent out 2 demon kings to force him to use more than 10 spirit energy giants and exhaust his energy, making it easier to capture him alive. However, he only used 4 spirit energy giants to stabilize the situation. This is truly unexpected. Demon Guard Lord Gordon said in a muffled voice, "Ruler, could it be that Angolesha's information was wrong? It's also possible that this human's strength has improved again. After all, he's a human called Savior." Isman sneered, clearly not interested in being called Savior. Actually, Isman's casual words had guessed the truth. Bai Xiaowen's strength had indeed increased. His control of spiritual energy had risen to expert level, and he also had the buff from God's offering. That was why he was able to suppress 2 lesser demon kings with 4 spiritual energy giants. Under normal circumstances, at least 8 to 10 spirit energy giants would be needed to fight against 2 lesser demon kings. This would cause Bai Xiaowen's spirit energy to be exhausted too quickly, which would definitely satisfy Silver King Isman's wishes. After Isman finished his comments, he slowly stood up and smiled. However, the pitiful resistance of the humans should end now. Demon Guard Lord Gordon was somewhat excited. He knew that the great ruler was about to personally make a move. Gordon had only seen this scene once before. Isman suddenly took a deep breath. Instantly, a vast aura spread out like a gust of wind, sweeping through the entire icy plains. The rank suppression of god descendants. This was a kind of natural pressure. Only living beings with divinity could resist this kind of level suppression. Although Bai Xiaowen's army had the immemorial contract and could resist Isman's suppression to a certain extent, most humans and undead soldiers still felt their bodies become heavy, as if there was an invisible nightmare suppressing their bodies. Every movement required twice as much energy as usual. This was already considered very good. If it weren't for the ancient contract, these ordinary soldiers wouldn't be able to do anything. They wouldn't even be able to use their spiritual power. Their combined spiritual power attack would be even more of a joke. Even so, the spiritual energy output of the soldiers in the 14 square formations was still limited to a certain extent. The most obvious manifestation was that the bodies of the 4 giants had shrunk by half. As a result, its power was reduced by 40 to 50%. He can still move? Isman furrowed his brows. He had been sitting on the fishing platform, relying most on his superiority as a descendant of God. No matter how hard these humans and undead tried to resist, when Isman used his full power to suppress them, they would become lambs waiting to be slaughtered. This was the source of his confidence. Great ruler, the enemy must have made preparations in advance in response to your pressure. Gordon shouted, that human just said that this ice field was his chosen battlefield, and this strange magic array was also set up by him in advance. However, the enemy will still be affected by your pressure, and their strength will be reduced by at least half. That makes sense. Isman stepped out in the air, and his handsome face regained its original calmness. Then I'll do it myself. Let's end this farce as soon as possible. Silver King Isman is doing it himself. Bai Xiaowen's pupils constricted slightly. Of course, he knew how terrifying a high-level descendant of God was. His encounter with Atli Lan Thor on the dinosaur planet still left him with a lingering fear. Now, although Bai Xiaowen's strength had increased a lot since the time he explored the dinosaur planet, and the number of troops under his command had increased exponentially, this was the first time he faced a high-level descendant of God. He couldn't help but feel a little nervous. True inner force poured out, and Bai Xiaowen connected to all the other square formations. Don't panic. First, build the impregnable wall formation. Bai Xiaowen's spiritual consciousness was closely watching Isman's every move. Unknowingly, he used the mental cultivation technique to capture the aura and tried to predict where Isman's first attack would land. Isman moved, and his aura was captured by Bai Xiaowen at the same time. Number 8 Skeleton Formation. Impregnable Wall Formation, Spiritual Energy Manifestation. Bai Xiaowen's heart skipped a beat. Wasn't this mental cultivation technique's aura capture the same as the Kenbun Shokuhaki from a pirate manga? At least in terms of capturing the enemy's attack position, it was somewhat similar. A black spiritual energy giant holding a giant shield rose from the top of number 8 Skeleton Formation's head. Boom! Isman's first attack was indeed number 8 Skeleton Formation. A giant demonic claw made of dark energy fell from the sky above the 8th skeleton phalanx. The next second, the black spiritual energy giant's giant shield clashed with the demonic claw. Rumble! The giant shield shattered, and the soldiers of the number 8 Skeleton Formation trembled once. However, Isman's attack also came to an end, and he did not break the impregnable wall formation of number 8 Skeleton Formation. The morale of the human militia was greatly boosted, but the demonic army was puzzled for a while. The incomparably powerful Silver King was actually blocked. The smile on Isman's handsome face disappeared. He did not understand why his attack was predicted in advance. To be honest, it was a little embarrassing to fail in front of so many subordinates. It's just some fancy tricks. Then, I'll use absolute power to subdue him. Isman's humanoid body suddenly surged with green flames and rapidly expanded. In the billowing smoke and dust, only a black shadow could be seen growing bigger and bigger. The smoke and dust dissipated. Isman had become a monster, a true demon. This was the Silver King, the true body of the ultimate demon king. He was 12 meters tall, with red eyebrows and fierce eyes, and green demonic flames burning in his eyes. Overall, he still had the outline of an enlarged human, but there was no skin. His green tendons were exposed, and his palms and feet had 4 fingers/toes, with sharp nails like a beast. Other than the head, his body was a bit like the Namekian in Dragon Ball. A thought flashed through Bai Xiaowen's mind. This god's descendant demon Isman was only 12 meters tall, while the god's descendant Atli Lanthor on the dinosaur planet was 1,000 meters long. The difference in size between the two was huge, but there was not much difference in strength. Instead, Isman's demonic body was more condensed, and his 12-meter-tall body could better utilize his advantage in speed and skills. Human, I want to attack this place. After Isman transformed into his true body, his voice also changed, and it was filled with a tyrannical aura. Try to block me. Isman strode forward like a phantom, arriving in front of number 8 skeleton formation in one step. Chapter 1745. In front of the 12-meter-tall Isman, the spirit giant with the black shield above skeleton formation number 8 seemed a little short. Isman stomped down without any fancy moves, as if he was stomping on an ant's nest. Because it was too fast, Bai Xiaowen did not have time to react. He could only control the spirit giant with the shield to raise it again and block it diagonally. After Isman's monstrous foot connected with the spirit shield, there was a momentary pause. It was as if time had stopped, and all sound had disappeared. The focus of the battlefield was on the contact between the foot and the shield. Asterisk crack. Asterisk the faint cracking sound was as shocking as a thunderclap. The spirit shield shattered. The spirit giant dissipated. The impregnable wall formation was destroyed. Isman smirked and stomped down. The dozen or so skeleton soldiers that were stomped on were, of course, annihilated. When the foot landed on the ground, a powerful dark energy shockwave exploded with Isman's thoughts. The impact of a divine-level dark energy was fatal. Without the protection of the array, the hundreds of skeleton soldiers near Isman's feet were blown into pieces by the dark energy shockwave. The skeleton soldiers that were further away were also shaken by the impact and lost a large portion of their health points. Then, the demon soldiers pounced like wolves and tigers, slaughtering the skeleton soldiers who had lost their protection. After destroying formation number 8, Isman did not stop. He stepped forward and arrived in front of formation number 9, punching down. Without a doubt, the spirit giant formed by this formation could not withstand Isman's attack and was destroyed again. At the same time, formation number 9 was destroyed as well. 2 formations were destroyed in a row. This was a 1,000-man formation, a formation condensed with the power of 1,000 skeleton soldiers. Yet, it could not withstand Isman's one punch and one kick. Long live the Silver King! Long live the great ruler! The demons seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. They cheered loudly as they charged forward, slaughtering the skeleton soldiers in formation number 8 and formation number 9. After Isman personally attacked, the King of Pride and the King of Pain silently retreated a distance away. The 2 demigod demon kings had suffered heavy losses. They had a deep sense of danger and needed to recover quickly. Isman snorted. He could have directly targeted the militia formation where Bai Xiaowen was, but he did not do so. He still wanted to capture Bai Xiaowen alive and cut off Bai Xiaowen's wings one by one. In Isman's eyes, he still had the absolute advantage. Bai Xiaowen also understood Isman's thoughts. Divine-level creatures are indeed powerful. However, after developing for so long, I'm not completely defenseless. All units, open fire! Bai Xiaowen's true core force surged wildly. Instantly, 12 spirit energy giants rose above the remaining 12 square formations. All of the spirit power giants wielded black whips. Bai Xiaowen made up his mind to restrict Isman's movements first. 12 black whips weaved into an impenetrable net of whips, enveloping Isman. However, Isman displayed an extremely skilled combat technique. His 12-meter-tall figure was like a withered leaf. He drifted back and forth between the shadows of the 12 black whips, dodging most of the whips. For those whips that could not be dodged, Isman only needed to punch or palm to blast them away and shatter them. This way, Isman's dark energy consumption was actually very low. Dodging was the most energy-conserving combat method. This guy's combat specialty is definitely beyond expert level. It's at least master level. Bai Xiaowen thought to himself. If this continued, even if Bai Xiaowen could hold on with his spiritual power, the soldiers in the 12 square formations would easily run out of spiritual power. After all, he had used the sacrifice of God effect this time. It increased his spiritual power outburst, not his endurance. Fortunately, he had chosen to increase his outburst ability. If he had chosen to increase his endurance, he would not be able to fight the two demigod demon kings head-on. If he could not hold on, it would be meaningless no matter how long he lasted. Seeing that Isman was still at ease, Bai Xiaowen gritted his teeth and waved the two blood-red flags. Helbart's expression tightened. He understood what Bai Xiaowen meant by waving the two blood-red flags at the same time. He was going all out. Militia. Take the strength pill. Use demonic outburst. Helbart swallowed the two strength pills in one gulp, and then urged the demonic blood to boil in his body. His body was surrounded by green flames, and his psionic power that was more than twice as powerful burst forth. He had temporarily gone from commander level to rare lord or even demigod level. Lord Christos, accept my power. Helbart roared. The rolling spiritual power converged toward the spiritual giant above his head. At the same time, the armed leaders of the other 4 human settlements also roared. They had all taken the strength pills and used demonic outbursts to gather all their power at all costs. Lord Christos, please. The militia captains, and even the ordinary militia, all roared with bloodshot eyes. It had to be known that the power of demonic outburst alone was enough to raise the power of one template. Coupled with the help of the strength pill, how terrifying would it be? An ordinary template would become a demigod. An elite would become a demigod. A demigod would become a demigod. Of course, demigod was the limit. Not to mention that there were no lord-level figures among the human militia. Even if there were, with demonic outburst and the strength pill, they would only be at the demigod level. It was impossible for them to reach the demigod level. If that was the case, their bodies would not be able to take it. Bai Xiaowen did his best to control the surging spiritual power. This was a new challenge, not just because of the difficulty brought about by the huge amount of spiritual power. The most important thing was that the difference in strength between the militia was very obvious. This was not beneficial for control-type evolvers to use their combined spiritual power or even materialization. They needed to have extremely strong control and guidance abilities. The 1,000-man square formation increased the difficulty even further. Fortunately, Bai Xiaowen never disappointed at the crucial moment. Boom! 2 dark giants that were dozens of meters tall took shape above the 2 militia formations. The strength of the energy contained within made even Isman, a demigod, fearful. Gathering the power of a group of ants, you actually have the ability to threaten me. Human, you are very powerful. Isman said loudly. However, they are only 2 dead things. Human, if you can't hit the enemy with your attacks, it's meaningless no matter how strong you are. With my speed and dodging ability, I won't be hit by these 2 dead things. Is that so? Isman, look under your feet. Bai Xiaowen raised his hand, a victorious smile on his face. You have already entered the death area of the Void Trap Immortal Formation. Chapter 1746. The Void Trap Immortal Array had 4 major areas: life, death, entrapment. Since it was a basic immortal array, its initial power was not strong. It would only evolve into the 3 areas of entrapment, and life. The most powerful area of death would not appear directly. As time passed, the immortal array's evolution would cause the 3 areas of entrapment, and life to intersect. The point of intersection would be the area of death. This was also when the power of the Void Trap Immortal Array was at its peak. For all targets in the area of death, regardless of friend or foe, in addition to the doubling of entrapment and entrapment effects that suppressed spiritual energy and restricted movement, there was also an additional corrosive effect that weakened defense and slowly decreased health. Previously, Isman had been in the entrapment area. He had been using his powerful strength to forcefully ignore this negative effect. But now, the effect of the binding had doubled. Even with Isman's strength, he felt his movements become sluggish. A series of black whips came whistling. Other than the giants above the militia formation, the remaining 10 surviving black spiritual energy giants above the skeleton formation all channeled their spiritual energy to the maximum at the same time and swung their black whips. Isman's footsteps had a mysterious feeling of spatial dislocation. Even under the disadvantageous situation of being restricted by the immortal array, he still managed to dodge 7 of the black whips. 2 of the remaining 3 black whips were deflected by Isman's 2 punches. In the end, he bit off the 3rd whip. However, these 10 black whips were just a cover. Above the 2 militia formations, the gigantic spiritual energy giants that were dozens of meters tall moved. The gigantic spiritual energy giant on the left pounced forward and made a simple grabbing motion. Its spiritualized arms were like 2 tentacles of an octopus, tightly wrapping around Isman. Isman felt pain as his skin was rubbed and tightened by the spiritual energy giant's soft arms. He was in disbelief. How many years had it been? He had long forgotten the feeling of pain. His condensed demonic body and powerful outer skin defense could not even penetrate Isman's dark energy defense with a full-force attack from a king-class powerhouse. Moreover, even if Isman did not use his dark power to defend himself, his hardened demonic skin would only cause minor injuries to a king-class master's attack. The opponent's attack could at most injure his tendon fibers before it was blocked by Isman's powerful physical defense. But now, Isman's powerful physical defense and dark energy defense had mostly dissipated, becoming weak. Bai Xiaowen suddenly waved his hand, and the giant on his right raised a huge black spear. Thrust! The black spear pierced through the octopus-like tentacles of the previous giant and pierced into Isman's body. The wind howled as the dark spirit energy of the 2 gigantic spirit energy giants flowed through the black spear and surged into Isman's body, causing a shocking explosion. Rumble! Isman coughed up a mouthful of green blood. He had been stabbed in the heart, which was also Isman's vital point. Even someone as strong as Isman would be heavily injured by the injection of powerful spiritual energy and the explosion. The explosion of spiritual energy from the inside could cause a huge amount of damage that ignored defense. This was also Bai Xiaowen's specialization, mastery of spiritual energy, which could only be obtained after reaching expert level. Bai Xiaowen did not stop when he saw Isman vomiting blood and looking like he was on the verge of death. Stop pretending, Isman. You have 3 hearts. Including your brain, there are 4 vital points in total. The giant on the right pulled out his black spear and stabbed again. The same spiritual energy explosion broke open the 2nd heart in Isman's left abdomen. Isman let out an angry roar. There was a hint of fear in this roar. He finally realized that the shadow of death was looming over him. I cannot die. I am the supreme demon, the eternal king. As he roared, jagged bone spikes bloomed on the surface of Isman's body, making him look like a giant hedgehog. The octopus-like arms of the gigantic spirit energy giant that was restraining his demonic body gradually loosened. They were hit, stabbed, and cut off by the jagged bone spikes. However, above the other 10 skeleton phalanxes, the 10 ordinary spirit energy giants were not idle. Layers of black whips surrounded Isman, reinforcing his restraints and preventing him from moving. Bai Xiaowen controlled the gigantic spirit energy giant on the right to stab again and burst Isman's last heart. Isman roared in pain. His aura withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. With 3 hearts burst, he was seriously injured this time. Next, as long as Bai Xiaowen completed the final attack and destroyed Isman's brain, he would be able to complete the magnificent feat of killing the demigod. However, at this moment, something strange happened. One of the talismans of the Void Trap Immortal formation suddenly jumped out and exploded in the air. Like a domino effect, the destruction of one talisman caused the other talismans to explode as well. This was the drawback of the talismans. Although multiple talismans could increase the power of the formation, when faced with the enemy's destruction, it would also affect the entire formation. As long as the talisman at the starting point was found, it would be easy to destroy it. "Who is it?" the three heavenly kings, Helbart, and the others all shouted. Bai Xiaowen immediately controlled the gigantic spirit energy giant and tried to stab the black spear out. However, the gigantic spirit energy giant's movements were much slower. From the moment Bai Xiaowen thought to the moment he attacked, it was as if he was caught in a slow-motion movie. He felt that his mind was being disturbed. How embarrassing, Isman! In the next second, the figure of a beautiful human woman appeared beside Isman's giant head. She floated in the air as if she had teleported. This beautiful human woman's figure and appearance were extremely alluring. However, everyone present, including the militia, felt like their minds were frozen. Their hearts were cold. This person's aura was too strong. The pressure she emitted was exactly the same as Isman in his human form. Isman could barely speak. He said weakly, "Rochelle." This beautiful human woman in front of him was one of the three ultimate demon kings, the thinker Rochelle. Rochelle appeared. When Bai Xiaowen had chosen the Silver King Isman as his target, he had considered the reactions of the other two ultimate demon kings. The other two ultimate demon kings did not have a perfect intelligence network like Isman. When Bai Xiaowen and Isman were fighting, they might not receive any information and would not come to help. If he chose the Thinker or the Tyrant as his target, Isman would definitely receive the information and rush to help. On one hand, it was possible that he would only fight one ultimate demon king. On the other hand, it was certain that he would fight two ultimate demon kings. This was a choice out of desperation. Chapter 1747. However, the subsequent developments deviated from the planned path. Silver King Isman initiated an all-out war against Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen could only accept the challenge. The scale of the war was too large, and news of it had already spread to the Dark Continent. Perhaps Tyrant Nibraz in the Eastern Continent did not know, but it was not surprising that Roxel, who was suspected to be in the Western Continent, received the news. Then, with the Thinker's curiosity, how could he let go of such an interesting human specimen like the Savior? "Isman, it's all your fault." Roxel shrugged. "I've been waiting in the City of Disaster for a long time, wanting to watch this big show. Who knew that you would use the space portal to return to the City of Silver without bringing me along? I could only use teleportation to hurry back, and it was not easy for me to make it to the last battle." Roxel's speech was very unique. Although she spoke in the demon language, the pronouns she used were common. She did not use the typical I or thou pronouns. Isman panted and said, "Stop complaining, Roxel. The human in front of you is also at the end of his life. Help me destroy him. I can share the secrets in his soul with thee." Isman was right, and his judgment was very accurate. Bai Xiaowen had been controlling many spirit giants to fight, and it had consumed a lot of energy. He could not continue using his true inner force. Moreover, Bai Xiaowen's army had used the special effect of sacrifice to the gods. Their instantaneous explosive power had undergone a qualitative change, but their endurance was naturally greatly reduced. The two militia formations were the most obvious. Many of the militia had pale faces, and they were only relying on their belief to support themselves and not fall. The aftereffects of using demon outburst and swallowing strength pills were huge. What was even more tragic was that many people might not be able to wait until the aftereffects took effect. "Well said." Thinker Roxel waved his hand and looked at Bai Xiaowen and the militia formation with interest. "Let me take a look. Are you the savior of humanity, Christos? How interesting. That idiot Erasmus's mysterious prophecies were indeed somewhat redeeming. If you don't mind, can I do a few experiments?" Thinker Rosher, Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath, but his eyes were still bright. "Stop bluffing. I don't sense the strength of the Supreme Devil King from you. In other words, your true body isn't here. Ha ha ha. You're wrong. I don't have a real body. I only have 3 avatars. Time passed too quickly, and there were too many mysteries in the world that needed to be explored. So I divided myself into 3 parts and traveled the world in different places. Everyone in Bai Xiaowen's army breathed a sigh of relief. Luo Xiar continued, but what's the difference? Even if this incarnation's strength is only a third of mine, it's not something those secondary devil kings can compare to. It's more than enough to get rid of you now. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. Rocher wasn't lying. The scan of the Eye of Evolution showed that Thinker Rocher's spiritual energy limit was 6,500 points. This number wasn't much lower than Isman's. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he had the strength of a quasi-divine descendant. Moreover, because this incarnation had Rocher's combat level, specialization and experience, it would be very difficult to fight. Isman had at least a master's movement technique and a magical ability to move as if space was disordered. If Bai Xiaowen hadn't used strength several times that of Isman's and used force to break his technique and suppress his movements, it would have been impossible for him to burst 3 of Isman's hearts. This also had to be done with the help of the space trap Immortal Array's death area. The key was that he didn't have strength several times that of Rocher's incarnation. The space trap Immortal Array had also been destroyed by Rocher. It was impossible to restrain her movements. Rocher also said that she was good at teleportation. It seemed that Isman was a warrior, while Rocher was a mage. Comparing the two, Rocher was more difficult to trap. Everyone maintained a solid wall formation. After Bai Xiaowen gave the order, one by one, the spirit giants disappeared. Oh, you're going to surrender? Luo Xiar smiled. What a pity. I wanted to see how powerful your amazing control ability is. Bai Xiaowen had no choice. If he continued to maintain the spirit giants, the last of his true inner force would be used up. When that time came, he would be at the mercy of Rocher. Rocher, are you ready? Lose 1/3 of yourself. Bai Xiaowen's figure floated, and he took a step forward. He left the solid wall formation's range and arrived in front of the 2 armies, facing Rocher. In the open space in the center of the battlefield, other than the dying Isman, only Bai Xiaowen and Rocher stood facing each other. You look quite confident. Rocher wasn't as arrogant as Isman. After all, Bai Xiaowen had already forced Isman into a corner and proved his ability. She curiously observed Bai Xiaowen, a faint light flashing in her green eyes. How strange. You've already used up most of your spirit power. It's good enough that you have 10% left. Why do you still have the confidence to leave the protection of the formation and stand in front of me? Bai Xiaowen smiled. The scale of this war has exceeded my expectations. I've already guessed that you must have received news of the war breaking out. Under such circumstances, do you think I would be unprepared? In the middle of the army, a beam of white light from a teleportation formation lit up. Before the confusion in Rocher's eyes faded, she heard a loud beast roar. Soon, a large group of demon beasts rushed out of the formation happily. The leader was a wolf with a huge body and snow-white fur. It was the Wrath Claw. Every demonic beast had a collar around their neck. It looked very strange, as if they had changed from wild beasts to domesticated ones. Let's go. Bai Xiaowen gave the order. At the same time, 3 small, glowing swords flew out from behind Bai Xiaowen's head and floated around the battlefield. It was the basic sword seal Chenrong had created for him. Rocher wasn't angry. Instead, she smiled. These lowly beasts are no threat to me, and your 3 flying swords are too weak. Even if I don't use my dark power to protect myself, they can't hurt my skin. Human, if this is the basis of your confidence, then my evaluation of you will drop a level. Bai Xiaowen smiled. When the demon beasts were scattered across the battlefield, Bai Xiaowen snapped his fingers. Crackle! Dazzling chains of lightning suddenly flashed in all directions. It was as if a grid of lightning chains was laid out in the middle of the battlefield. Chapter 1748. What is this? Roxel tilted her head curiously. A large electric net. Do you think you can trap me like this? Bai Xiaowen did not speak. He waved his hand and controlled 3 flying swords to circle around and shoot at Roxel from 3 different directions. Roxel could sense that the power of these 3 flying swords was extremely weak. As she had said before, even if she did not use her dark energy defense, they could not break through her demonic skin. However, Roxel was extremely wary of Bai Xiaowen. She would rather be more cautious. When the flying swords attacked, she was about to teleport. Of course, Roxel was also very concerned about the large electric net that covered thousands of meters. She could feel that the electric net contained a very strong paralyzing force. Even if she touched it, her movements would be stopped. Therefore, the destination of the teleportation was very obvious. It was to teleport out of the electric net's range. Roxel, as the only mage-type demon king among the 3 ultimate demon kings and demon-level demons, had mastered teleportation, which could be used both offensively and defensively, to the point of perfection. She could activate it with just a thought. However, Roxel's teleportation had failed. An invisible force caused the space here to become one and restricted any teleportation-type skills. In the blink of an eye, one of the small swords had reached the back of Roxel's neck. Swoosh! With a flash of light, the Bai Xiaowen in front of him suddenly disappeared, swapping places with the small sword. Teleportation, Flying Thunder God. Bai Xiaowen's figure appeared behind Roxel and stabbed with a dagger that had been charging up for a long time. Boom! Roxel's dark energy shield exploded and blew Bai Xiaowen away. However, from the tip of Bai Xiaowen's finger, a dazzling needle of lightning flew out. The needle was extremely thin, but extremely sharp. It pierced through Luo Xier's dark energy shield and stabbed her in the back. Roxel's figure only paused slightly. Even though his vital point had been hit, the power of the lightning needle just now was simply too weak. For example, it was similar to being bitten by a mosquito. With Roxel's huge health value, HP bar, the loss was less than 0.1%. It was the kind of injury that would automatically heal in a breath. Is this your attack, human? Luo Xier mocked. It's not even enough to scratch an itch. It seems that you've really run out of spiritual energy. As he spoke, Luo Xier stared intently at Bai Xiaowen's expression. As a thinker, Roxel was not an arrogant fool. She was very wary of Bai Xiaowen. It was precisely because of this that she had to goad Bai Xiaowen and try her best to belittle Bai Xiaowen's attack so that Luo Xiaowen would reveal the deeper meaning of her attack. Luo Xiaowen believed that Bai Xiaowen's seemingly useless attack must have a deeper meaning. Of course, Bai Xiaowen would not be goaded into action. The lightning needle is an attack condensed from my true inner force. Only by using a single point to break the surface can I break through Luo Xier's dark shield. Fortunately, I have expert-level spiritual energy control, so that I can perform such a sharp piercing attack. However, including the consumption of the teleportation technique, each attack consumes about 150 points of true inner force. This is already the maximum amount of true inner force that can be saved under the premise of spiritual energy control. I only have 3 chances to attack. No, only 2. Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath. Under the skin of the Eye of Evolution, Luo Xier's blood vessels, bones, and tendons were all visible. At this critical juncture, the scanning ability of the Eye of Evolution was enhanced to another level. In Bai Xiaowen's eyes, it formed an incomparably transparent world. He could see through the surface and see the essence of people and things. As soon as Luo Xier's tendons moved, Bai Xiaowen could make the corresponding prediction. Damn the lightning magic array, it's restricting my teleportation technique and my ability to move. However, as a spellcaster, I'm best at long-range attacks. As long as I use powerful magic, it'll be enough to blast the opponent into smithereens. Luo Xier suddenly raised his hand, and an energy arrow surrounded by green light shot out. Chaos Arrow. It was extremely fast, like a bolt of lightning. Generally, the more powerful the single target spell, the slower the speed of the arrow. However, for Luosier, it seemed to defy common sense. This was because Luosier's meditation mastery had reached an astonishing level. For ordinary people, this was the speed of a bullet, and it was impossible to dodge. However, Bai Xiaowen predicted Luosier's tendons trembling and raised hand movements in advance. He moved 6 meters horizontally and dodged this attack. With a loud bang, the chaos arrow pierced through the ground, leaving behind a deep hole. The hole was very deep, but there were few cracks on the surface. This meant that Luosier's control of spiritual energy was also quite terrifying. The power was contained but not shown, and it was rarely wasted. Bai Xiaowen made use of his agility and speed to dodge, which was also very meaningful. The teleportation technique was safe and convenient, but it consumed true inner force. Bai Xiaowen's physical strength was more abundant now, but he was lacking in true inner force. He could save as much as he could. Luosier raised both hands continuously and shot chaos arrows continuously. However, Bai Xiaowen was extremely agile and kept dodging her spell bombardment. The 3 flying swords also surrounded Luosier, constantly buzzing as they revolved. Luosier had already seen the teleportation technique's close-range attack. No matter what, she did not want to give Bai Xiaowen a second chance to get close to her. She could not use teleportation in the lightning array, but Luosier's physical fitness was not to be trifled with. She easily bounced and jumped, constantly dodging the flying sword's approach. Damn it. Since single-target spells are not effective, then I'll use a large-scale spell. I don't believe you can dodge it. Luosier took a deep breath, and her eyes suddenly turned green. Her head of green hair also floated up, Ring of Death. Ring of Death. Ring of Death. 3 green rings of fire surged and surged, covering almost all the space on the battlefield. This kind of omnidirectional spell with no blind spots was the nemesis of agility-type warriors. Moreover, Luosier had cast 3 rings of death in one go, sparing no expense and expending a huge amount of spiritual energy. As long as one of the rings of death brushed past Bai Xiaowen, with his current condition of lacking spiritual energy, he would not have the ability to use spiritual energy to protect himself. He would definitely be severely injured. This was Luosier's thought. However, in Bai Xiaowen's eyes, the violent movement of Luosier's lungs was the precursor to a big spell bombardment. The flow of dark energy and the spread of the rings were all in Bai Xiaowen's eyes. Even the omnipresent wind has a weak spot where it starts first and then arrives later. Any area of effect attack has a weak spot. My Orochi is like that, and so is Luosier's Ring of Death. It's just that these weak spots are hard to find, and they disappear in a flash, so it creates the illusion that the area of effect attack cannot be dodged. Chapter 1749. Swoosh. Bai Xiaowen appeared in the middle of the second green ring of fire, and a sword mark that was spinning at high speed appeared where he had been standing. Just as the third ring of fire gushed out, Bai Xiaowen's figure disappeared again, and a sword seal appeared on the spot once more. Where is he? Where is he? Rosher, who had been moving at high speed to prevent Bai Xiaowen from getting close to him, suddenly lost sight of Bai Xiaowen. In the next second, he felt a chill that felt like needles coming from behind him. Impossible. I've been moving at high speed, and my dexterity is higher than this human's. How can he get close to me? Rosher's pupils constricted. Your high speed seems to have no trajectory, but from the direction of your bones and tendons, I can predict where you'll land next. Bai Xiaowen flicked his wrist and used his remaining quintessence to send a second lightning needle into Luosier's back, aiming for his heart. At this moment, Rosher was in a state of emptiness after unleashing a series of powerful attacks. He had no energy left to counterattack. After Bai Xiaowen succeeded, he jumped and fled at high speed. Bai Xiaowen could not help but thank the art of war in Taishu Sutra for strengthening his body. At this moment, Bai Xiaowen's dexterity was as high as 170 points, which was why he was able to escape from Rosher's next attack. It's over. Bai Xiaowen sighed and narrowed his eyes. Standing in front of Rosher, he clenched his fists. At the cost of 99% of his health points, God Slayer ability activated. The spiritual realm's precepts notified him, target creature detected, Demon Rosher is a god's descendant, and the same vital point has been damaged by your attacks twice. God Slayer ability activated successfully. Will confrontation in progress. As you have hit twice, you have gained 5 will points. Will points are being evaluated. Will confrontation 1. Target God's descendant, Rosher, will die immediately. God Slayer ability entering cooldown, which will last for 3 days. During this period, your health points will slowly recover. Bai Xiaowen felt excruciating pain all over his body, as if he had been slashed 17 or 18 times in an instant. Although he did not really bleed, his skin rapidly paled and lost its color. His body swayed and he almost lost his balance. Fortunately, the 3 heavenly kings were loyal and devoted. They stood in front of Bai Xiaowen in a triangular formation. Sigdelifa half knelt on the ground and supported Bai Xiaowen's body with his broad chest. As soon as the notification from the spirit realm's laws ended, Luo Sierra let out an earth-shattering scream. 2 streams of blood spurted out from her heart, one in front and one behind. The wounds showed no signs of healing, and her dark energy was rapidly dispersing. She pointed at Bai Xiaowen and wanted to say something, but her eyes quickly lost their light and she fell to the ground with a thump. After Rocher's death, the illusion dissipated, revealing the corpse of a giant spider with a human face. Following Rocher's death and Isman's heavy injuries, the spectating Abyss Devils immediately dispersed. As for the 2 secondary demon kings, they slipped away faster than anyone else. Bai Xiaowen did not bother to chase after them. Phew, the hindrance is gone. Now it's time to destroy Isman. Isman, whose 3 hearts had been punctured, only had 1 brain left to keep him alive. With such heavy injuries, even a demigod would not be able to recover in a short time. Without external help, Isman would need to lie down for 3 days before he could regain his basic mobility. As for recovering part of his strength or even his peak strength, it would take months or even years. Of course, Bai Xiaowen would not give him the chance. He put on the blessing of longevity and transferred the 1,000 points of true inner force stored in it into his body. The longevity heaven's curse was the bleeding of the 9 great curses. You're trying to kill me while I'm down. Bai Xiaowen shook his head and laughed. He looked panicked, but he was actually as calm as an old dog. With the Wrath Claw's life-sharing link, of course, he was only sharing his health points. Bai Xiaowen only had 1% of his health points left, so the Wrath Claw was basically taking all the damage from the bleeding. But the Wrath Claw had thick skin and full health points, so it did not care about the bleeding. Just now, when he was fighting against Rochelle, Bai Xiaowen did not dare to use the blessing of longevity to absorb the stored true inner force. He was afraid that he would be stunned. That would be terrible. Anyway, according to Bai Xiaowen's estimation, he would definitely be able to kill Rochelle with the Godslayer's ability. Even if he could only hit her twice, it would be enough. Because Rochelle was not complete and only had 1/3 of her strength, she was considered a demigod. Since she was still a demigod, she was still within the range of the Godslayer's ability. The difference in strength between Bai Xiaowen and Rochelle was not that big, so he was confident in his willpower. Of course, if there was a small probability of failure, Bai Xiaowen had a backup plan, which was to escape. There was also a small teleportation formation in the middle of the malicious formation. On the other side of the teleportation portal was the mountain behind Wutu Town. If he lost, Bai Xiaowen would escape without hesitation and use the resonance portal in the cave behind Wutu Town to escape back to the White Phoenix territory. Although the demigod mission would fail, how could it be more important than his life? Where there is life, there is hope. Of course, now that he had one, there was no need to tell the natives the details of the teleportation portal. It could be considered as preserving Christos' imposing image. After absorbing 1,000 points of true inner force, Bai Xiaowen was energized. A large amount of soul essence flew out of his Grim Reaper's face mask and poured into the bodies of the two undead army skeleton soldiers. The originally depleted spirit force of these skeleton soldiers also quickly recovered. There were even a few skeleton soldiers that had undergone a template evolution due to their rebirth. But even if they evolved, they would only grow from normal to elite. Bai Xiaowen was too lazy to pay attention to them. The spirit force manifestation activated again, and two pitch-black spirit giants rose. When the spirit giants' pitch-black spears were aimed at his forehead, Silver King Isman finally showed a panicked expression. "No, human outsider, don't kill me, so you can speak the human language. It's better not to use words like I or thou. It sounds more comfortable." Bai Xiaowen smiled. Isman took a deep breath. "Outsider, you have nothing to do with the humans here. Why fight for them? Why don't you join me? I can help you build an army of abyss devils so that you can dominate the battlefield in your own plane." "Not interested." Isman's face paled. "Wait. You should have the remains of a demon god on you, right? I have them too. As long as you let me go, I am willing to give you the remains of a demon god." Chapter 1750. The Remains of a Demon God? Bai Xiaowen's movements paused slightly. In fact, ever since he entered the Dark Age dimension, Bai Xiaowen had been very interested in the fact that demons could be reborn infinitely. This ability to reverse the laws of life and death was not a common racial talent of demons. It could be explained if one or two demons had this ability, but if all the demons in the dimension had this ability, it was worth thinking about. Then, Bai Xiaowen discovered that the Silver King Isman had a special attitude toward him. It seemed like he valued him a lot. Otherwise, with Isman's arrogance, he would not have gathered all his military forces and thrown them into the war against Bai Xiaowen. All signs indicated that Isman also had a part of the death god's remains. However, Isman mistook it for the remains of a demon god. However, no matter what the name was, it should be referring to the same thing. Even if it was not the remains of the death god, it was definitely the remains of a true god. Its value was immeasurable. Bai Xiaowen noticed from the corner of his eye that Helbart, Witch Kelluan, and the others were looking at him worriedly. "If I kill you, I can still get that bone." Bai Xiaowen sucked in a breath. The black spirit giant's battle spear stabbed a little deeper into Isman's head. "Impossible. I put the demon god's skull in my storage device. Only I can open it. If you kill me, you will never find it again. You will lose it forever," Isman said loudly. The three heavenly kings were deeply shocked as they watched Isman struggle to survive. In private, they were also having a small meeting. Is this Isman really a descendant of God? An existence that stands at the top of the continent? Abaddon was in disbelief. Why is he so afraid of death? Butcher Paji, coward. Stinky. Not tasty. Delifa Sid coughed. Both of you don't have to be surprised. Who said that all the important people in high positions must be heroes? Isman was born as a demon king. From the moment he was born, he had the power of a descendant of God. I don't think he went through any training. I'm afraid he has never experienced such a setback in his life. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. What Sig Delifa said made sense. Bai Xiaowen had never believed that strength equated to a strong will. There were many innate experts who were born with good skills. Although they had great strength, in terms of vision, willpower, and style, they were not as good as experts who had been trained and grew up. Isman was born as a divine descendant and stood at the peak of the continent. He also had a long lifespan. It could be said that he had obtained everything that ordinary people could only dream of without any effort. But the more a person was like this, the more they feared death. Why were there so many emperors in the ancient Huaxia who firmly believed in the elixir of immortality? Why did they seek the Tao of immortality in all kinds of ways? Why did they plunder and refine elixirs? It was because they had enjoyed the ultimate glory and wealth of the human world that they were reluctant to part with it and wanted to live forever. That being said, the demon god's skull that Isman mentioned, Bai Xiaowen guessed it to be the death god's skull, could indeed be in Isman's storage equipment. If he killed Isman, it would really be difficult to find the location of the death god's skull. However, he had to kill Isman. This was the final step of the Savior's descendant chain mission. Furthermore, he was killing Isman's true body. Unlike Rosher's avatar, he would drop luxurious equipment. At that moment, Kelawan's voice sounded. Lord Christos, if you kill Isman, I can help you find the skull. Really? Bai Xiaowen looked sideways, but he didn't believe it. Kelawan saw the doubt on Bai Xiaowen's face and went forward to explain. It's true. Lord Christos, do you know how storage equipment works? Bai Xiaowen shook his head humbly. Every storage equipment contains a small storage space. And this storage space is, in fact, attached to our world. Kelawan said calmly, every storage equipment has the owner's mental imprint. A person can use a mental connection to quickly communicate with the target's storage space and take out items from it. Once the owner of the equipment is killed, the owner will lose the mental imprint. Correspondingly, the storage space will no longer be able to be opened through a mental connection. And then? Bai Xiaowen asked. Kelawan continued, however, ownerless storage spaces don't actually disappear. They still exist attached to our world. The medium can exist in a flower, or rock, or even a tree. I can help you find the location of the storage space through divination and open it directly. Bai Xiaowen nodded to indicate his understanding. She's lying. This woman is lying to you. She. Bai Xiaowen shook his head. I can still tell if she's telling the truth or not. From Kelawan's breathing, heartbeat, and other minute movements, Bai Xiaowen could determine that Kelawan indeed had the ability to divine. However, having the ability didn't necessarily mean having the will. Bai Xiaowen added, after I kill Isman, do you promise that you will perform divination for me and find the demon god skull? Kelawan bit her lip and nodded. No. You can't. Isman's brain was directly pierced through by the black spirit spear. This powerful god's descendant, the strongest demon king, was killed by Bai Xiaowen just like that. A burst of enthusiastic cheers erupted from the militia formation. The cheers lasted for a long time. The humans who had been oppressed for a long time hugged each other and cried as they celebrated. The dawn of humanity had arrived, at least on the surface. Bai Xiaowen didn't join in the celebration. He ordered the 3 heavenly kings to clean up the battlefield and collect Isman's corpse. Then, he walked towards Witch Kelawan. I think we should find a quiet place to talk. Witch Kelawan's body shook. After a while, she nodded as if she had accepted her fate. Bai Xiaowen led Kelawan into his bone chariot and put down the curtain. All right, Miss Witch. I'm very curious. What have you and your dead teacher prepared to deal with me? Bai Xiaowen said with a smile. Kelawan stared at Bai Xiaowen. How did you find out? Bai Xiaowen smiled. I'll explain to you later. Now, can you show me your hand? Let me remind you. If you want to attack, you only have one chance. Also, there's no turning back between us. Please think carefully. Kelawan's thin body trembled slightly. The back of her hand with blue veins stretched out from under her black robe. In her hand, she held a small staff with cracks. Christos, please leave our world. Please leave. Chapter 1751. Bai Xiaowen's Eye of Evolution glanced at the cracked staff. Staff of Exile, epic item. After use, target creature can be imprisoned and banished to a random dimension. Note, the banishment effect is ineffective against creatures of God's descendants. Remaining uses, 1/3, what an excellent move. Bai Xiaowen laughed. Then why don't you just activate it? With Isman dead, the demon god domain maintained by the 3 demon kings will also collapse, and the demons will completely lose the ability to be reborn. Then, with me, the troublesome savior out of the way, the humans of the Dark Age can usher in true freedom. I can't do it. Which Kelawon put down the staff of exile and said frankly, if you want to banish Lord Christos, you can only do it when you're unprepared. Since you've already predicted this step, there's no chance. In other words, if I didn't reveal this in advance, you would have found a chance to activate this move and banish me if you thought I was in the dark. Bai Xiaowen nodded. After all, in order to eliminate Rosher's incarnation, I used the ability to cause mutual destruction. Now, my strength is at its lowest. Yes. Which Kelawon didn't hide it and directly admitted it. Now, can you tell me how you saw through it? Bai Xiaowen smiled. I knew when you told me the 3 prophecies. This. Kelawon's eyes widened. Do you remember what I said to the dying Isman? Bai Xiaowen stood up in the bone chariot. I can tell if a person is lying or telling the truth from subtle reactions such as breathing and heartbeat. At that time, you told me that you only knew the contents of the first 2 prophecies. I knew you were lying. You hid the 3rd prophecy from me. After a pause, Bai Xiaowen continued, then it's very intriguing. Since I'm the destined savior, why can't I know the 3rd prophecy? This shows that the 3rd prophecy is disadvantageous to me, but it doesn't affect the overall situation of eliminating the demons. I think, since the 3rd prophecy is called the end of Savior Christos, is it the end of me being banished by you natives? Bai Xiaowen stared at Kelawon. No. Kelawon lowered his head and said, the 3rd prophecy tells a sad story. The warrior who slays the dragon sits on the dragon's treasure pile and gradually grows horns and claws. He eventually becomes a new dragon. Teacher said that after you complete the great cause, you will become the new demon king and rule this continent in the form of darkness. That's why he left the staff of exile to me. Interesting, your teacher's understanding of human nature is quite deep. Bai Xiaowen stretched out his hand. This thing is too wasteful in your hands. Give it to me. Kevin seemed to have accepted his fate. He handed the staff of exile, which he only had 1 use left, to Bai Xiaowen. You've already used it twice? Yes. On the journey to find the immortal stone wall, teacher encountered 2 crises and used the staff of exile twice. The first time was when he encountered a secondary demon king, and the second time was when he encountered the thinker, Rosher. Rosher? Isn't this thing ineffective against the descendants of God? It's just that it can't banish him, but the previous imprisonment is still effective. Teacher used the effect of imprisonment to temporarily trap Rosher for a period of time and escape from his claws. Bai Xiaowen nodded. These 2 uses of the staff of exile also made Erasmus the great sage realize that the staff of exile was effective against secondary demon kings, but not the strongest demon kings. However, using it to deal with the so-called savior was really accurate under the circumstances of being unprepared. In fact, was Erasmus' prophecy wrong? From the perspective of the humans of the Dark Age, it was quite accurate. Bai Xiaowen didn't want to destroy all the demons. To him, the most beneficial situation was to become the new demon king and command a large demon army. In this plane world, there were many immemorial contract slates. Bai Xiaowen could find these contract slates and force the other demon lords to sign a contract to form a certain binding force. Although the binding force wasn't as strong as a master-servant contract, and there was a possibility that the demon army would betray him after signing the contract, this wasn't a problem. Bai Xiaowen was confident that he could control the demon army. The immemorial contract was only to organize the demons with the chaotic and disorderly attribute. Taking a step back, even if the demon army wasn't easy to deal with, the undead army shouldn't be a problem, right? Letting the 3 heavenly kings expand their armies in this plane world, although the new undead servants were weaker, their loyalty was absolutely guaranteed. These were the benefits of being the new demon king. What were the benefits of being the savior of humans? Although the humans of the Dark Age had the heaven-defying skill demon blood explosion, they couldn't escape the environment of the Dark Age plane. Otherwise, their template would be greatly reduced and they wouldn't be able to be the main army of the territory. Of course, it wasn't completely without benefits. Through human society, they could still collect many resources unique to the Dark Age plane. However, compared to the powerful demon troop class, it was needless to say which one would benefit more. Kelluan, you promised me that you would help me find the demon god's skull that Isman has. Bai Xiaowen turned around and glanced at Kelluan. You're not going to go back on your word, right? Kelluan lowered his head and said, I can help you with the divination, but I have a condition. Ha, Bai Xiaowen shook his head and laughed. As expected, you want to use this as an excuse to bargain with me. Tell me your condition. But you have to be careful. When he killed Isman, Kelluan had already promised to help Bai Xiaowen with the divination, which was equivalent to killing Isman as a condition of exchange. Now that Kelluan had raised a new condition, it was obviously an additional condition. That was why Bai Xiaowen sneered. Kelluan said, Can you leave this world forever as a condition? Bai Xiaowen asked in return, Do you think that's possible? Kelluan stared at Bai Xiaowen. That skull should be very important to you. Bai Xiaowen could see through people's minds. As the only beloved disciple of the great sage, Kelluan was certainly not a fool. It's very important. Bai Xiaowen was also very frank. But no matter how important it is, it can't compare to the entire Dark Age world. Do you think I'll neglect the essentials? Bai Xiaowen lied here, but he was very skilled and most of what he said was the truth. The Dark Age plane was a world dominated by demons. If they obtained the so-called demon god's skull, it would be like obtaining the imperial jade seal passed down from the strongest demon king, Isman. They would have the ability to use this world to expand their demon army. Without the Dark Age plane, even if they obtained the demon god's skull, it would be useless. Chapter 1752. In Kelluan's eyes, Bai Xiaowen was telling the truth. However, to Bai Xiaowen, the demon god's skull was most likely the death god's skull. To him, it was something more important than the entire Dark Age. On this point, Bai Xiaowen lied. However, due to insufficient information, Kelluan did not know the importance of the death god's skull to Bai Xiaowen. It was inevitable that he would be at a disadvantage in the negotiation. Before the negotiation, Bai Xiaowen also asked about one thing. What did the death of Isman, one of the three most powerful demon kings and one of the three godly descendants, mean? What kind of effect would it have on the demons of the Dark Age dimension? After all, which Kelluan had said that as long as one of the demon kings was killed, it would mean the end of the demons' rule. Bai Xiaowen wanted to know what this end of the demons' rule meant. Which Kelluan replied, My teacher said that there were no demons in our world. Later on, the invasion of the three demon kings brought an endless number of demons, which eventually polluted our world. The three demon kings are the foundation of the triangle that maintains the pollution. Losing any one of them will cause our world to gradually repair itself, and the demons will be expelled. Bai Xiaowen understood. If the demons were the germs that invaded this world, then the three demon kings were actually the germs that protected the germs. They continued to pollute the Dark Age dimension, turning it into a paradise for the demons. Bai Xiaowen could also understand why Kelluan and his disciple wanted to banish him, the Dark Savior. It was because he was no longer needed. The demon camp had lost a corner of the triangle, and the entire camp would gradually collapse. Moreover, Kelluan's teacher did indeed know through the prophecy that Bai Xiaowen was not a pure good person. Bai Xiaowen could understand why the teacher and disciple wanted to burn the bridge after crossing it. However, understanding did not mean that he could accept it. Bai Xiaowen was not someone who was willing to work for free. The next step was to maintain the existence of the demons and create a demon army to fight for him. If it could not be maintained, then he would expand the size of the undead army. No matter what, he had to bring this dimension, which was more than half conquered, under the rule of the White Phoenix domain. Bai Xiaowen did not feel that he was in the wrong. After all, he was the one who defeated Isman. He took the most credit. Why should he be kicked aside when it was time to divide the cake? He should have the biggest slice of the cake. The humans of the Dark Age did contribute their strength. Bai Xiaowen's heart. He would give the humans of the 5 towns a certain amount of living space to allow them to reproduce and prevent them from being disturbed by the demons' invasion. As for the size of the living space, that would be the bargaining chip in the negotiation with Kevin. Kalaos, Kelawan's father, Kalaos was Heli and had a demon king of the world. Kalaos, Kelawan Xiaowen. In the end, Bai Xiaowen agreed to demarcate the living space for the humans. The initial demarcation was around the Black Swamp, all the way to Disaster City. It was about half of the territory ruled by the King of Disaster, Typhast. It would be a safe zone. Bai Xiaowen promised that he would restrain the wandering monsters in the safe zone. Those that did not obey his orders would be eliminated. The safe zone would become a paradise for the humans. Apart from this safe zone, the land outside would be ruled by Bai Xiaowen. He was free to do whatever he wanted. In exchange, Kelawan had to help Bai Xiaowen divine and find the demon god skull that Isman had. In addition, Kelawan had to keep the details of this deal a secret. He had to maintain Bai Xiaowen's image as the savior of the human settlements. Kelawan had no other choice. Revealing Bai Xiaowen's true face to the people was meaningless. It would only push both sides to the opposite side. With the strength of the human settlements during the Dark Age, they were no match for Bai Xiaowen's undead army. Unless they had a commander like Bai Xiaowen to lead them. Since that was the case, it was better to maintain Bai Xiaowen's image as the savior of the people. Both sides could maintain a harmonious relationship on the surface and give the people more space to live. I look forward to working with you. Bai Xiaowen extended his hand. The reason Bai Xiaowen was willing to negotiate was because Kelawan still had some value. He could help him find the demon god's skull. Thinking of this, Bai Xiaowen calmed down a lot when Kelawan wanted to kick him to the curb after he'd outlived his usefulness. Bai Xiaowen lifted the curtain and walked down from the bone chariot. He stood in front of the chariot and raised his hand to salute the militia. The militia cheered and knelt down in unison with their hands raised high. They almost worshipped Bai Xiaowen as a god. Kelawan saw this scene and sighed in a low voice. Her reputation among the people was far less than Bai Xiaowen's. Even if she stood out to expose Bai Xiaowen, it was hard to say who the people would believe. Looking at Bai Xiaowen's pale face due to the negative effect of the Godslayer, Kelawan once again suppressed the idea of a sneak attack. She knew how terrifying this man was. He had endless tricks up his sleeves and could even plot against the descendants of gods. She was just a little human witch. There was nothing she could do. Although he looks like he's on the verge of collapse now, once he launches a sneak attack, he'll definitely have a backup plan. That was Kelawan's thought. And that was the truth. With life-sharing, Bai Xiaowen was as steady as Mount Tai. Even an epic-level tool like the Staff of Exile would not have any effect when Bai Xiaowen was on guard. After all, the combination of the basic sword seal and the teleportation Daoist technique was too flexible. It was impossible to be hit by a tool. Bai Xiaowen walked down from the chariot. The three heavenly kings reported the loot from the battlefield. Most of the equipment looted from the demon lord's corpses were damaged or even destroyed. Other than some materials that could be recycled, there was not much value, so they would not be mentioned for the time being. The most valuable items were the corpse of the Silver King Isman and the incarnation of the Thinker Rosher. Let's talk about the Thinker first. Rosher had divided 1/3 of himself and injected it into the body of the human-faced spider demon. A demon that could be chosen by Rosher as an incarnation was definitely not simple. It was definitely at the king level. If it was not possessed, it would be the 5th lesser demon king. Bai Xiaowen had used the ability of the Godslayer to kill Rosher's incarnation. Therefore, the human-faced spider demon's equipment was left intact. There were a total of 7 pieces, and all of them were epic-level purple equipment. Unfortunately, other than a necklace, the other 6 pieces required a large body size to be worn. The last piece, the spider demon armor, even required the body size of a spider with multiple legs. This was too difficult. I wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day. If you don't have a partner, get out of singleness as soon as possible. End of chapter. Chapter 1753. The attributes and additional skills of these purple equipment were quite good, but there was no commander-type equipment. Bai Xiaowen directly distributed 5 pieces of equipment that required large body size requirements to the 3 heavenly kings. Bai Xiaowen put away the Arachne armor for the time being and kept it in storage. As for Bai Xiaowen, he received a necklace. Mind shackles, quality, epic, purple, equipment position, neck, equipment requirement, 120 base spirit, attribute, none, additional skill 1, mind magnification, passive, your spiritual power amplification increases by 1 level. Additional skill 2, mind suppression, infusing spiritual power into the mind shackles necklace will activate a mind suppression halo, dulling the thoughts of all creatures within a large range. The effect will decrease for creatures with a higher template. Cooldown time, 1 natural day. Durability, 100-100, description, one of the 7 major parts obtained after the thinker disassembled his divine weapon. Divine weapon part? Bai Xiaowen perked up. It seemed that the thinker Rosher had a divine weapon, but this lunatic not only divided himself into 3 parts, but also divided his divine weapon into 7 parts. He estimated that the 7 parts were all epic-level purple equipment, and in the end, they might be able to restore the divine weapon. Bai Xiaowen hurriedly looked at the descriptions of the other equipment that was stripped from the human-faced spider demon's corpse. The rest of the equipment was not labeled as divine weapon part. Bai Xiaowen was slightly regretful. It seemed that the human-faced spider demon incarnation of the thinker Rosher only carried 1 divine weapon part, and that was this necklace. Putting aside the divine weapon part, the attributes of this necklace itself were very good. Although the spiritual power amplification was only 1 level, it was an additional amplification. What did that mean? Bai Xiaowen currently had the spiritual power amplification of United, Blade of Grassland Brothers at level 4. Every time he used this dagger to attack, he would infuse 100 points of true inner force and burst out with 140 points of true inner force. The Blade of Grassland Brothers was a one-handed weapon, and Bai Xiaowen could still hold another one in his other hand. But no matter how many blades he had, when he used the Blade of the Brothers of the Grassland to attack, the spiritual power increase was only level 4 at most, and the power increase was only 40%. However, the necklace's passive ability, Mind Magnification, could increase Bai Xiaowen's spiritual power by 5 levels. That alone was worth it, not to mention that it also came with the active skill Thought Suppression. When the thinker appeared, Bai Xiaowen's attacks on Isman seemed to have slowed down. It must have been caused by this thought suppression skill. If used well, this skill would have a miraculous effect. Then, it was the looting of the Silver King Isman's treasure. The Silver King, Isman, was in his true form and did not have any extra clones. That was why he was able to plunder his full set of equipment. There were a total of 12 pieces of epic equipment, including the head, chest, legs, feet, hands, and other main body parts. There were also necklaces, rings, accessories, capes, and other small items. Of course, each of these pieces of equipment had their own unique characteristics. Any one of them would attract the fanatical pursuit of countless evolvers. However, Bai Xiaowen did not care. His attention was already attracted by an item. Silver Throne, quality, divine artifact, orange, equipment requirement, divinity, equipment position, seat, attribute, charm plus 20, additional skill 1, seat of dominance, passive. Friendly troops morale plus 20 and will not collapse due to morale. Enemy troops morale minus 20 and have a certain probability of fleeing or defecting before battle. Additional skill 2, seat of dominance, passive. Increases the attributes of all troops under your command by 10 to 20%. Increases the spiritual power limit and recovery speed by 10 to 20%. The extent of the increase is related to morale. If you are a control-type evolver, the increase to your troops will always be the maximum. Additional skill 3, seat of origin, passive. You receive a fixed spiritual power increase of 10 levels. Your spiritual power recovery speed is increased by 100%. The above effects do not stack with any other equipment. Durability, never wear out. Description: this is the throne that accompanied the birth of the Silver King. It is the eternal crown of the Dark Master. The Silver King's throne is actually a divine artifact. Bai Xiaowen admired the pure silver throne. The throne was engraved with flowery demonic characters and symbols. It was full of mystery and shone with a soft light as if it was a work of art. This was the first time Bai Xiaowen had obtained the complete version of a divine artifact. Back in the grasslands of the Xiao Plain, he had obtained the blessing of Tingri after killing Temujin. Although it was also a divine artifact, it was cursed and was not very useful. This was because although Temujin was the final boss of the Plain World, he was only a king-tier model. This throne divine artifact was different. Bai Xiaowen had obtained it after facing Isman head-on and killing him. It was natural that a divine artifact dropped by a god's descendant would not have any negative curse effects. As for the special effects of the Silver Throne, it looked very cool. The Seat of Dominance and the Seat of Dominance were skills suitable for control-type evolvers. They were most useful when leading an army. Judging from these two skills, the Silver Throne should be a control-type divine artifact. It was a bit of a waste for Isman to use this divine artifact. After all, Isman was a warrior-type god's descendant. It was difficult for him to use the upper limit of the divine artifact. Although Isman liked the fun of war, the difference between him and Bai Xiaowen was like the difference between an amateur and a professional singer. As for the third skill, Seat of Origin, sitting on the throne would allow one's spiritual power to increase by 10 levels. It was simply too terrifying. For Bai Xiaowen, who was a long-range and magic-type powerhouse, it was equivalent to doubling his damage output. And his endurance was doubled. However, it was a pity that Isman could not use the Seat of Origin's abilities. He was a warrior and specialized in close combat. Who had ever seen a warrior sit on a throne and fight? This throne was also very special. Although it was a piece of equipment, it was a sitting tool. Only when one sat on the throne could they use all sorts of skills. Once they left the throne, they would lose their bonuses. Bai Xiaowen caressed the Silver Throne lovingly. Even if there were some inconvenient restrictions, this throne was still an excellent divine artifact. It greatly increased Bai Xiaowen's strength. Bai Xiaowen immediately sat on it. The moment he sat on it, his aura sublimated. He became more dignified. It was as if his entire body was glowing with power. No one dared to look at him directly. This was the effect of the Silver Throne increasing charisma by 20 points. The Silver Throne could not be stored in a storage device. It was also quite heavy. However, this weight was not much of a burden to the skeleton soldiers. After it was placed on the skeleton war chariot, the undead servants could drag it around freely. Its speed was not slow. Chapter 1754. Why couldn't the Silver Throne be stored in a storage device? Bai Xiaowen's interest was piqued. Generally speaking, only the storage device itself could not be stored in another storage device. The spatial fluctuations would repel each other, so it could not be stored indefinitely. Could it be that the Silver Throne was a storage device? Bai Xiaowen carefully pondered for a while before he realized that there was a secret compartment on the back of the throne. After opening the compartment, he could see a string of demonic characters. He could vaguely feel spatial fluctuations from the engraved characters. In other words, the space incantation engraved in the compartment was equivalent to a storage device connected to a storage space. Bai Xiaowen could conclude that the storage space connected to the secret compartment must have the Silver King Isman's most prized collection. The demon god skull must also be in it. After all, this was a space incantation engraved in a secret compartment specially opened on the divine throne. Unfortunately, the storage space connected to the secret compartment had been lost. Other than Isman's mental power, no one else could open it. There was only one path in front of Bai Xiaowen, and that was to bypass the storage device and directly find the exact location of the lost storage space. Keloan. Bai Xiaowen called out simply. If he wanted to use divination to find the location of the lost storage space, of course, the more clues he had, the better. Although the secret compartment incantation could not be opened, it was still a clue. The witch lowered her head and walked to the front of the silver throne. She looked at the incantation in the secret compartment and copied it down on a sheepskin scroll. "Have you memorized it?" Kellowan nodded. "How long?" Kellowan shook his head and said softly, "I don't know either, lies," Bai Xiaowen said quietly. "Lies are meaningless to me." Kellowan's breathing quickened. Helbart, who was beside him, also seemed to sense the strange atmosphere. He came forward to smooth things over and said with a smile, "Lord Christos, don't worry. The witch will do her best. Kellowan, you have to remember that even without you, I can still find the demon god's skull. Your value lies in the fact that you can save me time. Therefore, my patience with you is limited." Bai Xiaowen issued a warning. He did not care what Helbart and the others thought of him. Would these people see him as the new demon king? From the current love to hatred and rejection? These were not Bai Xiaowen's concerns. Except for his family and friends, Bai Xiaowen had always been pragmatic. His words were concise and direct. Which Kellowan nodded gently, "I will do it as soon as possible. Give me half a month." Bai Xiaowen frowned slightly. Half a month was still too long. However, he didn't push it too far. After thinking for a while, he said, "All right, we'll set it as half a month." Every day the divination results are released, the range of human settlements will increase by 100 kilometers on the basis of what we agreed upon. You should know how large this area is. Which Kellowan had also learned geometry from her teacher. She asked, "Does it mean that the radius will increase by 100 kilometers?" "Yes. I understand." Kellowan took a deep breath. Now they had no choice but to hope that Christos would keep his word. It was impossible for Kellowan not to be grateful to Bai Xiaowen. After all, without Bai Xiaowen, the demon's rule would never be broken. However, this matter concerned the fate of mankind. No matter how grateful he was, he had to put it aside. Emotions were often powerless in the face of benefits. It was the same for Bai Xiaowen. He could not be emotional and ignore the huge benefits of the Dark Age plane. Helbart looked at this scene. From his initial doubts, he gradually understood. He looked at Bai Xiaowen. He wanted to say something, but he closed his mouth. In order to make it easier to collect the divine artifact, Bai Xiaowen erased the space spell carved in the secret compartment. Since this space spell was carved later, it would not affect the divine artifact itself even if it was erased. Without the disturbing spatial fluctuations, Bai Xiaowen could finally put the throne into his storage ring. Delifa Sig said with some regret, "Master, you should have put the throne on the bone chariot. Only you deserve such a throne. It's so cool to sit on it and command an army." Bai Xiaowen smiled. "It'll come in handy when I'm commanding a real battle. Forget about it. I'm not used to it and it's inconvenient." Delifa Sid was just being playful. She then presented Bai Xiaowen another spoil of war. It was a fist-sized magic core that looked like a diamond. Dense colorful waves flowed on the surface of the magic core. It was as gorgeous as soap bubbles under the sun. "This is the magic core taken from Isman's body. Master, please take a look." Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly and scanned it with the eye of evolution. Demonic core, mythical material. A demonic core containing endless evil energy. Please find the relevant professionals to understand the further use of the demonic core. Bai Xiaowen shuddered. This was a core taken from a demon-level demonic core. To understand its use, there were probably only two professionals to find, Rosher the Thinker and Nibraz the Tyrant. The problem was that the Tyrant was a locust in the eastern continent. He had destroyed one of the Thinker's avatars, and the other two avatars were still hiding in some corner. Hearing Bai Xiaowen's analysis, Sig Delifa looked annoyed. "Sigh, these two professionals are hard to find. Even if we find them, I'm afraid they won't tell Master how to use them." Delifa Sig had a point. It was like asking an intelligent donkey what a donkey's whip was for. The donkey would definitely kick you. Bai Xiaowen thought for a moment and smiled. Don't worry. The thinker will come to us. Not only Delafa Sig, but even Paji and Abaddon looked doubtful. Bai Xiaowen did not say much. He smiled and distributed the rest of Isman's equipment to the 3 heavenly kings. As for the extra equipment, Bai Xiaowen kept them for future use. Then, the militia returned home. Bai Xiaowen temporarily parted ways with them and led the undead army to enter the City of Silver. It was another large-scale raid. Bai Xiaowen ordered the undead army to search for valuable materials, crystals, and other strategic resources and pile them up into a mountain. However, Bai Xiaowen specifically ordered the undead army not to destroy the buildings in the City of Silver. Bai Xiaowen was quite fond of this city made up of palaces. He decided to occupy it permanently and make it the base of the White Phoenix domain in this plane. Just as Erasmus predicted, the hero sat on the pile of treasures left behind by the evil dragon and gradually grew horns and claws, turning into an evil dragon. Chapter 1755. After collecting so many precious materials, in addition to his previous reserves, Bai Xiaowen finally did not have to worry about materials for his 3 refinements method. The triple refinement technique was very useful. Just in the battle with the Silver King, it had already shown its potential. Although it was just basic content, it was still a branch of immortal arts. In terms of alchemy, with Bai Xiaowen's current understanding of basic pharmacology, he could develop several basic recipes. If mass-produced, it would be like the strength pill, which would be very useful in increasing the overall combat strength of the army. The weapon refining technique was mainly used to refine artifacts. The weapon refining technique had a limited output. It was good enough to refine 1 artifact a day. There was also the possibility of losing the base material. Therefore, it could not be popularized in the army. It could only be given to Bai Xiaowen to increase his combat power. Of course, even if he took out artifacts, the undead army might not be able to use them. The weapon refining technique was very useful for increasing one's combat power. Although Bai Xiaowen's 7 demons soul-suppressing artifact did not work, it was because the spirit of the descendants of gods was too strong. It would definitely be effective against enemies at or below the king stage. The last talisman refining technique was a trump card that could allow the weak to defeat the strong. The immortal array formed by combining multiple immortal talismans had the power to turn the tide of a battle. If not for the space-trapping immortal array restricting Isman's movement, Bai Xiaowen might not have been able to defeat him. Compared to the talismans of the Shangqing school, the Taishu Sutra's immortal talisman branch was of a higher level. There was a fundamental difference between the two. If he had to compare, Bai Xiaowen felt that only Chenrong's Shangqing treasure book, which was also a king-level occupation classic, could be a match for Isman. Of course, the Shangqing treasure book was a classic that specialized in talismans, while the Taishu Sutra was all-inclusive. Looking at it this way, the Taishu Sutra seemed to be of a higher level. There were also differences between king-level occupation classics. The difference was more obvious than between Lord-level and Hero-level occupation classics. Bai Xiaowen felt that the Taishu Sutra's 6 major immortal art branches should be the best even among king-level classics. Of course, the Great Void Sutra was one of those manuals that was weak in the early stages but strong in the middle and later stages. In the entire early stages, other than a specialization, spiritual force control, it did not give any profession manuals or skills. If an evolved person wanted to enjoy the benefits of the Great Void Scripture, they would have to pass through the early stages safely. After Bai Xiaowen plundered the City of Silver's inventory, he returned to the human settlement. Kelawan, Helbart, and other human leaders did not preach to other humans that Christos was a bad guy. Of course, even if they said so, no one would believe them. Bai Xiaowen's reputation in the human camp had long surpassed worship, if there was a reputation level. At this moment, he was pushed to a high position by his fanatical admirers as soon as he appeared. The humans were preparing to establish a United Nations. There was no doubt that Bai Xiaowen was elected as the first king. Bai Xiaowen did not want to be king at first. To him, there was no difference whether he was king or not. However, other than him, there was no one else who was qualified. After all, Helbart was only the military leader of Wutu town, and he was not convinced by the other 4 military leaders. Kelawon was even more delicate and weak, and as a witch, she could not be a political leader. It was worth mentioning that Kelawon and Helbart, who knew Bai Xiaowen's true colors, were also strongly in favor of Bai Xiaowen becoming king. Bai Xiaowen obviously understood their intentions, and he did not reject them. Since they wanted a puppet, he would give them one. No matter who sat on the throne, Bai Xiaowen was the ruler of this new kingdom. On the first day of his reign, Bai Xiaowen promoted the 5 military leaders, including Witch Kelawon and Helbart, to a 6-member council known as the Hexagram. The civil affairs of the new kingdom were all decided by the Hexagram Council, and there was no need to report to the king. The militia was transformed into a unified army of the new kingdom. When there was a need to deploy troops, the Hexagram Council would come up with a draft and submit it to the king for him to sign. Bai Xiaowen left behind a wood avatar and sat in the simple palace, acting as a human-shaped seal. He himself returned to the City of Silver and moved the resonance teleportation array to the City of Silver, making it his new headquarters. The 3 heavenly kings led the elite undead legion and rushed to the blockade, which was the boundary between the east and west continents. Bai Xiaowen built the new City of Silver. Countless undead servants worked hard to transform it into a city filled with undead that suited Bai Xiaowen's wishes. Bai Xiaowen himself still spent a lot of energy on increasing his strength. Apart from studying the manuals, he used the 3 nurturing technique to increase his cultivation level and the 3 refinement technique to refine some war equipment. Time passed day by day. Finally, one day, a black raven flew to the new City of Silver. The raven landed and transformed into an old man wearing a black wizard robe with crow feathers. The undead guards brought the old man in front of Bai Xiaowen. "Rosher, we meet again." Bai Xiaowen smiled. Rosher the Thinker wasn't surprised that Bai Xiaowen recognized his true form. He looked at Bai Xiaowen, who was sitting on the throne, and said, "You seem to have expected me to come. Actually, I thought that you would send a subordinate to deliver a letter or a communication tool. I didn't expect you to come in person." "I want to applaud your courage," Bai Xiaowen said. Rosher shook his head and said, "This is only an avatar of mine. If I kill you here, you will only have 1/3 of yourself left." Bai Xiaowen stared at Rosher and revealed an ambiguous smile. "You won't do it. I have the knowledge you need here." Rosher coughed lightly. "Besides, even if you do, I already know how you deal with the descendants of God. I won't fall in the same place a second time." Rosher was right. There were only about 3,000 undead servants in the new City of Silver. Even if they formed a formation, Bai Xiaowen wouldn't be able to do anything to Rosher with his spiritual energy manifestation. As for the Godslayer's ability, it was actually quite demanding to activate. It needed to hit the same vital point more than twice before it could be activated. With Rosher's ability, once he was on guard, he wouldn't let Bai Xiaowen easily reach the conditions to kill him. Most importantly, Bai Xiaowen needed Rosher. The two of them had a common goal, and that was, to continue maintaining the existence of the devils in this world. "You have taken everything from Isman, and I have been secretly observing. Your ambition isn't to be the savior of humanity, but to become the ruler of darkness and rule the continent, including the devils. The devils are a troop with great potential." "You need them," Rosher said. Bai Xiaowen nodded. "I have Isman's inheritance in my hands. You need my cooperation to maintain the devil's corruption of this world." Chapter 1756. Rather than calling it pollution, it's better to call it modification. Rosher smiled. "To make this world more suitable for demons, so that it won't reject them. Actually, our request isn't too high, as long as there's a place for us to stay." Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. "What do I need to do?" Rosher said, "To be exact, as long as you don't do one thing: don't destroy Isman's magic core, don't put it in storage, and don't take it out of this world. After a pause, Rosher said, the modification of this world has been completed. To maintain it, it's actually that simple. Bai Xiaowen nodded and took out the fist-sized colorful demonic god's core from his storage ring. Rosher's body emitted a ray of light that flowed along his body. Bai Xiaowen vaguely felt that this demonic god's core and Rosher seemed to have formed some sort of resonance. Even the evil energy in the Silver Palace quietly sped up. A hint of fear appeared in Rosher's eyes. The man in front of him had killed the Silver King, even though he had borrowed the power of the army. Actually, there shouldn't be any friendship between you and Isman, but you don't want his magic core to be destroyed, right? Bai Xiaowen asked. Rosher said, there's no friendship between demons. Alright, I can promise you that I'll leave this demonic god's core in this world. Bai Xiaowen looked straight at Rosher and said leisurely, but I have a condition. Rosher frowned slightly. Speak. Before Isman died, he mentioned something that I'm very concerned about, Bai Xiaowen said slowly. That's the demonic god's skull. What's that? Rosher frowned and said after some deliberation, this is the remains of the demonic god after his death. After a long period of research, we can use these remains to open an illusory domain to carry the souls of the dead demons. The demonic god domain can resurrect demons, right? Bai Xiaowen asked. What about now? Is the demonic god domain affected? That won't happen. The foundation of a demon god domain is the remains of a demon god. The three of us are only the initiators. As long as the three parts of the demon god's remains remained, the domain would not dissipate. Only the three of us who have the demon god's remains can completely destroy the evil demons. Bai Xiaowen nodded. The three gods' descendants didn't look like hard workers. If the demon god domain required the three of them to constantly expend their energy to maintain it, then it wouldn't have been able to continue operating without a single person. At the very least, Luo Sierra was free and undisciplined to the extreme. Luo Sierra seemed to have thought of something and said uncertainly, you don't have the remains of the demon god on you, do you? Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly. Looks like Isman started the war because of this. Rocher completely understood the cause and effect. That's right. In that case, you and Tyrant Nybros should also have a portion of the demon god's remains, right? Bai Xiaowen asked. Luo Sierra didn't hide anything. My weight is the least. I only have a bone in my right hand. Isman was lucky enough to get the skull. That guy, Nybros, was the strongest and took the most bodies. How many? Bai Xiaowen asked. 2 leg bones, Luo Sierra said. Bai Xiaowen keenly caught the word Luo Sierra had said earlier. You said took? Where did you find the demon god's remains? Luo Sierra shook his head, indicating that he didn't want to say. Let's change the question. You three gods' descendants, which world did you come from? Bai Xiaowen quickly followed up with another question. Luo Sierra's body trembled. He hesitated for a second. This? I can't tell you. Also, it won't do you any good to know. You don't know me. How do you know it won't do me any good? Bai Xiaowen stood up, his eyes burning. Now, you have 2 choices. First, hand over the demon god's bones you have. Second, tell me where you came from. If you can't do either of these, then I'll just take the demon god's core. You and that tyrant will scram back to your original world. Luo Sierra argued, what good will this do you? You'll still lose your demon army. Bai Xiaowen laughed. Sometimes, negotiation might not bring me any benefits, but it can force my negotiating partner into a desperate situation and have no choice but to compromise. Mr. Luo Sierra, or Ms. Luo Sierra. The name isn't important. The key is that you don't seem to want to return to your original world. Is that place that scary? Luo Sierra was very calm. Christos, your threat is very effective, but it's not a desperate situation for me. To maintain the existence of demons in this world, Isman's demon core isn't the only way. This was somewhat out of Bai Xiaowen's expectations. He narrowed his eyes and probed, for example, roping in another god's descendant from your original world? Luo Sierra didn't fall for it. He said calmly, "Stop probing." Bai Xiaowen sighed. This thinker was really difficult to deal with. After some thought, he decided to stop while he was ahead. "Mr. Luo Sierra, even if you have other options, the price is probably not small. If it was so easy to avoid Isman's demon core, you wouldn't have taken the risk to find me." Bai Xiaowen sat back down on his throne. "You have no use for the demon god's remains. How about you give it to me as proof of our friendship?" "I repeat, there is no friendship between demons," Luo Sierra said coldly. "I refuse." "Very well, where did you come from? How about you tell me what information you can?" Luo Sierra thought for a moment and said in a low voice, "I can only tell you that it's an extremely scary place. Even I can die there at any time. Demons were originally terrifying creatures, and God's descendant demons were the ancestors of all terrifying creatures." For someone of Luo Sierra's status to say that a place was extremely scary made Bai Xiaowen feel both wary and interested. Seeing that Bai Xiaowen wanted to ask more, Luo Sierra said first, "Don't force me. That's all I can say." "Very well." Bai Xiaowen shrugged. "Although I'm not very satisfied with your answer, I don't want the negotiation to break down. How about this, tell me the other uses of this demon core. Other than maintaining the transformation of this world, what other uses does it have?" Luo Sierra played dumb. No, I'm sure it has other uses." "Mr. Luo Sierra, you're smart, but I'm not stupid." Bai Xiaowen stared at Luo Sierra. "Tell me how to use it. You won't lose anything. You're not just not stupid." Luo Sierra thought. However, he had no other choice. Chapter 1757. "I see." Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly. Through Rosher's description, Bai Xiaowen knew that a demi-level demon king could send a collective notice to other demons through his demon core. The range covered the entire continent. It was similar to the loudspeakers in the village, but only demons could receive broadcast messages through their demon cores. The method of using it was also very simple. Through a set of simple demon symbols, the broadcast could be turned on. Bai Xiaowen suddenly remembered that back on the dinosaur planet, the demi-level ancient dragon, Atli-Lanther, should have had a similar ability to warn other dinosaurs and convey orders to other dinosaur groups. Otherwise, it would have been too fast for them to encounter the Great Riot on the dinosaur planet right after they escaped from Atli-Lanther's claws. Even modern human society might not have such an efficient notification implementation. "I've said all I can say. I'm leaving now." After Rosher told Bai Xiaowen this bit of information, he immediately bid farewell, as if he did not want to stay a minute longer. "Wait," Bai Xiaowen said with a smile. "Mr. Rosher, I hope to sign an agreement with you." "What agreement?" Bai Xiaowen said seriously, "Now, the Western continent is my territory. I don't want you to cause too much damage to this continent. The earthquake from before must not happen again. You want to restrict my freedom of research?" Rosher was angry. "Not at all. You can still use your avatar to wander in human society and study human physiology, psychology, and personality changes. But you can't cause large-scale destruction to human society. It's best if you don't even reveal your true form as a demon king." Bai Xiaowen stared at Rosher and said seriously, "Absolute freedom is like a kite with a broken string. The only outcome is to fall and be destroyed. No one can have absolute freedom." "I can't, and neither can you." Rosher said coldly, "If I don't agree, you'll take away Isman's demon core?" "That's right. This is the final condition of the exchange," Bai Xiaowen said. "Don't doubt my determination. Other than demons, I can also develop undead soldiers on this continent. They might not be much worse than demons." Rachelson's green eyes stared at Bai Xiaowen. After a moment of silence, he said, "I can agree. By the way, Christos, you're disgusting." After saying that, Luo Sierra turned into a black raven and flew out of the palace. He did not want to talk to Bai Xiaowen for even a second. Bai Xiaowen did not stop him. Oh! Wrathclaw stretched from behind the throne and came out. Boss, aren't you going to think of a way to make him stay? Maybe you can even get a part of a divine artifact. The bones you want can also be obtained from him. It's meaningless, Bai Xiaowen rejected. The roacher that appeared here is just an avatar. Even if he could kill this incarnation and obtain a fragment of a divine artifact, so what? Roacher's last incarnation would definitely not appear again, and the demon faction would forever close the door to communication. Not only would I not be able to obtain the demon's remains, but I would also be the target of Roacher's revenge. I can't guard the Dark Age plane forever. Then what about the demon god's bones? It feels quite important to you, boss, Wrathclaw said. Yes. We can only find another way. In the Dark Age plane world, it's better to stay put. We've been here for a long time. I plan to return to the White Phoenix domain after finding the demon god's skull in Isman's storage space. Bai Xiaowen took out Isman's demon god's core again. After circulating his true inner force and inputting a string of demon words, the colorful light on the surface of the demon god's core sped up. The demon message effect had been activated. As Bai Xiaowen spoke, all the demons in the Western continent, no matter where they were or what they were doing, heard Bai Xiaowen's low voice in the demon language. The most amazing thing was that the demons could only receive Bai Xiaowen's voice through their core of chaos. Other creatures that were not demons could not hear it. Demon minions of the Western continent, the original master of the City of Silver, your leader, the Silver King Isman, has been killed by me. His demon soul has also been destroyed by me. My name is Christos, the master of the new City of Silver. I have seized the throne of the Silver King and have officially taken over his position, becoming the new master of the Western continent. You have no choice but to submit. In 10 days, my army will begin a purge of the entire Western continent. Any demons that do not submit to me will be exterminated. Their demon souls will also be completely destroyed by me, never to be reborn. Demon minions that wish to survive, come to the new City of Silver within 10 days and kneel to welcome your new master. In an instant, the countless surviving demons in the Western continent heard the voice that came from the core of chaos. The demons in the Western continent were in an uproar. Many wandering demons who did not understand the course of the war asked each other about the truth of the matter. And in the Battle of the City of Silver, many demons who had fled described the tragic battle vividly. The power of the Dark Savior, Christos, and his terrifying means of destroying the souls of demons, as well as his tyrannical strength of manipulating the spiritual giant to contend with and even defeat the Silver King, had spread to every corner of the Western continent. If they had been informed in any other way, the demons who had not been there personally would have treated it as a joke. After all, Isman's power was deeply rooted in their hearts. However, this was the instruction that the demons received through the core of chaos. Such an instruction could only be given by the 3 strongest demon kings, who were powerful demons at the level of God's descendants. For Christos to be able to do this, it meant that he had indeed destroyed the Silver King and even obtained the Silver King's magic core. Then the question was, were demons afraid of death? If they could be reborn, they would not be afraid. If they could not be reborn, most demons were afraid of death. From the day Bai Xiaowen issued the announcement, countless demons gathered towards the new City of Silver like rivers returning to the sea. Demons did not have any concept of loyalty. They did not feel any psychological barrier from being loyal to Isman in the past and now being loyal to Christos. What was wrong with being loyal to the strong? Christos was a master who was stronger than Isman. Moreover, if they did not pledge their loyalty, only death awaited them. This was true death, the kind that could not be revived. Of course, there were also many demons who wanted to live a more free life. They rushed towards the Western continent's blockade line and prepared to migrate to the Eastern continent. However, Bai Xiaowen had already expected this. The 3 heavenly kings led the undead army and had already taken over the blockade line of the original King of Calamity, Typhist. Chapter 1758. Using the abundant resources stored in the blockade line, as well as the evil spell formations and defensive incantations, the undead army blocked the escaping evil demons in front of the blockade line. Both sides began to confront each other. The number of evil demons facing each other increased from 100 to a few hundred, and then to 1,000. Of course, these evil demons did not dare to attack the blockade line violently, as they did not dare to offend Bai Xiaowen. Delifa Sig advised them at the right time, and these evil demons could only give up on the idea of escaping, dejectedly rushing to the new city of Silver to accept the reorganization. The so-called reorganization was actually signing the primordial contract. As mentioned earlier, the primordial contract only had a certain amount of binding power, and these evil demons did not resist signing it too much. Of course, there were some evil demons who resisted Bai Xiaowen's identity as a human, but they were all taught a lesson by Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen, who used the qi nurturing technique to accumulate energy every day, had already reached the point where one shot of origin lightning was enough to instantly kill a high-ranked evil demon lord who was on high alert. The strength he displayed surpassed even the King of Pride, the King of Pain, and other king-level powerhouses, and was close to the god's descendant, Isman. The remaining evil demons no longer dared to challenge Bai Xiaowen's authority, and even the high-ranked evil demon lords were trembling in fear. Even though the high-ranked evil demon lords were very powerful, in front of a powerhouse who could decide their life and death, they would develop the mentality of a weakling. There were also evil demons who were unwilling to submit to Bai Xiaowen. The King of Pain, Sulfuron, abandoned his subordinates and went missing alone. It was not that Sulfuron had such decisiveness, but that his subordinates had all changed sides. After hearing Bai Xiaowen's warning through the God-Demon Core, there were not many evil demons who were willing to continue following Sulfuron. Of course, it was not that there were none. A dozen evil demon guards were still willing to continue following Sulfuron. However, Sulfuron was worried that it would be easier to be exposed if there were people by his side. Moreover, a dozen evil demon guards would not be able to accomplish anything, so he simply abandoned them all and decided to be a coward. Bai Xiaowen was well aware that Sulfuron was not willing to submit to him. Lesser demon kings like this were all ambitious people. Even the Silver King, Yith Gate, was not obedient to them. Secondary Demon King also knew that Bai Xiaowen's strength was not even at king tier. It was only by relying on its strange combination of control and attack that it was able to achieve the effect of the weak defeating the strong and challenging someone of a higher level. It was normal for them to be unconvinced. In comparison, the other lesser demon lord who took the initiative to bring his subordinates to join Bai Xiaowen, the King of Pride, had a more thought-provoking motive. Bai Xiaowen felt that it was inappropriate to use the word arrogant on Aliganti. She was clearly a woman who could take things up and let go of them. Out of curiosity and out of respect, Bai Xiaowen personally met Aliganti. "You actually have the courage to come here personally. Aren't you worried about your safety?" Bai Xiaowen asked. Aliganti's body was 4 meters tall. Even though she was half kneeling, she could still see Bai Xiaowen on the throne. She quickly lowered her eyes and said in a low voice, "Since you want to build an army of demons, you definitely won't kill me." She pointed at herself humbly and continued, "Compared to those weak demon lords, I'm much stronger and more useful." Perhaps to show her respect to Bai Xiaowen, Aliganti actually used the human language to communicate. Although it was a little unfamiliar, it was enough to see that Aliganti had put in a lot of effort. Even with her ability, it was not easy for her to learn the human language in a few days. Bai Xiaowen stood up from the throne and laughed. "King of Pride, you don't have to pretend in front of me. Stand up." Aliganti stood up. Although Bai Xiaowen looked up at Aliganti, in terms of spirit, energy, and spirit, he completely suppressed the other party. This was understandable. Aliganti had intentionally restrained her aura and was willing to be Bai Xiaowen's foil. "King of Pride, it's not hard to guess what you're thinking. You want to figure out the secret of my strength and one day learn the way of control and replace my position, right?" Bai Xiaowen said. Aliganti's expression tightened. He immediately said, "Lord, you misunderstand. I'm kneeling at your feet out of admiration and begging for your forgiveness. I don't dare to ask for your knowledge. Bai Xiaowen laughed. You're lying. Alleganti's muscles tensed. But don't be nervous. Bai Xiaowen smiled. Demons have no friendship or loyalty. They only have benefits. As long as you can learn the way of control, go ahead. I'm looking forward to the day you surpass me and challenge me. How about this? I'll give you 3 chances to challenge me. As long as the conditions are right, you can openly challenge me on the path of governance, and I'll accept your challenge. If you win, I'll give you the entire Western continent. Alleganti was unconvinced. Bai Xiaowen said this because he believed that it was impossible for him to surpass him. However, this emotion was suppressed by Alleganti. Bai Xiaowen also noticed this. His expression suddenly became serious as he slowly said, however, the king of pride, even demons don't like to be betrayed by others. As a human, it's even more so for me. So, as long as you betray me once, I won't give you any chance and will directly destroy your soul. Alleganti could also sense that Bai Xiaowen's tone was not fake. She was silent for a while before saying, Christos, I admire your breadth of mind. Don't worry, I will only challenge you fair and square. Only by defeating you in the way of control will I have the strength to dominate the entire Western continent. If I can't learn the essence of the way of control and rashly betray you, even if I succeed in seizing the throne, I won't be able to keep my position as the overlord. I'll only be removing obstacles for the other demon kings. It's meaningless. What Alleganti said made sense. Since Bai Xiaowen had made it clear, she did not beat around the bush. If she challenged Bai Xiaowen directly and defeated him in the way of control, it would mean that Alleganti had the strength to overthrow Bai Xiaowen. After all, Bai Xiaowen's biggest trump card was the way of control. If she had already surpassed him in strength, why would she betray him? Bai Xiaowen would have to abdicate himself. If she could not defeat him in a direct challenge, it would mean that Alleganti did not have enough accumulation. Even if she killed Bai Xiaowen through betrayal and backstabbing, she would only be helping Rosher, Nibraz, and the other demon kings. The Western continent still did not belong to Alleganti. Very clear thinking. Bai Xiaowen praised. And at that moment, a flying crane flew into the palace. When it landed, it turned into a paper crane. Bai Xiaowen took the paper crane and unfolded it. She was immediately delighted. Chapter 1759. Boss, why are you so happy? The wrath claw wagged its tail. It's a good thing. Bai Xiaowen stood up and smiled. That witch, Kelluan, is quite capable after all. The messenger crane came from the humans' new kingdom. The witch, Kelluan, had been trying her best to divine the location of the demon god skull for Bai Xiaowen in order to fight for more living space for the humans' new kingdom. The incentive policy set up by Bai Xiaowen played a big role. The witch, Kelluan, had divined the location of the storage space corresponding to the throne's hidden runes 6 days earlier than half a month. It was also very likely that it was the space where Isman stored the demon god skull. Prophecies could predict the future from the traces of the present and the past. This ability was indeed amazing and very useful in many cases. But so what if one had the ability to prophesy? If one was not strong enough, one would still have to listen to the orders of the powerful and waste one's lifespan and energy to perform the divination. This was also the reason why Bai Xiaowen was not satisfied with the results of the unification of the Black Tide Plane when he was still unawakened. If he had chosen to advance in the Black Tide Plane, he would have been able to obtain the Prophecy Lord's book and become a lord. But he would not have been able to make full use of his talents as a commander-type lord. He would not have been able to develop so quickly. It was impossible to defeat Isman with just divination and prophecy. Bai Xiaowen immediately summoned the Frost Wyrm. He temporarily handed over the affairs of the City of Silver to the newly joined Pride King. Then, he personally rode the Frost Wyrm and flew to the human kingdom. Things were different now. the entire western continent was under Bai Xiaowen's rule. He no longer had to be cautious. It was not a problem for him to fly on a flying mount. After entering the humans' new kingdom, Bai Xiaowen directly took the witch, Kelluan, out of the mental hut. Helbart wanted to report to Bai Xiaowen about the affairs of the new kingdom, but Bai Xiaowen was not interested. He did not think that Helbart would dare to play any tricks. This was based on his confidence in his military strength. On the frost dragon, Bai Xiaowen stood at the dragon's head, his white robes fluttering in the wind. His protective true essence automatically spread out, forming a streamlined protective membrane. Witch Kelluan stood at the dragon's neck and carefully grabbed one of the dragon's horns. With Bai Xiaowen's protective barrier, she was able to avoid the impact of the cold current. Why would such a gentle person compromise with the darkness? The thought flashed through Kelluan's mind, but she wisely didn't ask. "We're here." As soon as Bai Xiaowen finished speaking, the frost dragon descended and arrived at a deep valley. "These are the coordinates you mentioned. Where is the demonic god's remains hidden?" Bai Xiaowen asked. "Don't worry," Kelluan said softly, "after Isman's death, that storage space will merge with our world. The entrance to the space could be hidden behind a rock, or it could be hidden in a leaf. Just patiently look for things with spatial fluctuations. We'll definitely find it." Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly. The frost dragon meekly lowered its head, allowing its master to slowly walk down. Kelluan followed behind with her hands hanging down. "Lord Christos, did you reach an agreement with the demons?" "You can say that. I talked to one of Rosher's incarnations, and he promised that from now on, he would not use spells such as earthquakes that can destroy cities on a large scale. As long as the humans don't leave the safe zone, they won't be troubled by the demons in the new human kingdom." Hearing this, Kelluan hurriedly said, "I helped you divine the results 6 days in advance. You promised that the radius of the new human kingdom's territory would be expanded by 600 kilometers. Bai Xiaowen didn't even turn his head. "It only counts when we find it." He silently spread out his spiritual sense and sensed the spatial fluctuations around him. Due to the existence of the mental cultivation method, a branch of immortal arts, Bai Xiaowen's spiritual sense had also been expanded. It was 5 to 10 times stronger than other experts of the same level. In the future, as his cultivation in the mental cultivation method deepened, the difference would only increase. Kelluan thought of another problem and hurriedly said, "Lord Christos, you relied on a large number of troops to display the way of command to fight against the Demon King, right? Now that you're here alone, what if? I can't tell that you're actually worried about my safety. Wouldn't you be more than happy to see me dead?" Bai Xiaowen's voice had a hint of mockery. Kelluan lowered his head and muttered, "You didn't destroy Isman's magic core, so the demons won't be automatically expelled. This means that for a long time, humans and demons will coexist in our world. Without you, there will be no one left to protect our kingdom." "I see. What a practical woman." Bai Xiaowen smiled. "Don't worry. Even if I can't defeat the Demon King, escaping on my own won't be a problem. What you should be more worried about is yourself. If I were to escape, I wouldn't bring a burden like you with me." Kelluan hurriedly said, It's okay, Lord Christos. It's enough that you can escape on your own. You don't have to worry about me." Bai Xiaowen turned around in surprise and glanced at Kelluan. With Bai Xiaowen's intelligence, of course, she could understand Kelluan's intentions. This was not sacrificing oneself for others, but an extremely rational answer. Since Bai Xiaowen's importance to human society was 10,000 times more important than Kelluan himself, it was fine as long as Bai Xiaowen could escape. Bringing Kelluan with her would undoubtedly reduce Bai Xiaowen's chances of survival. In Kelluan's opinion, even if it was only 1%, it was very unwise. That was why she said those words in advance. Bai Xiaowen shook her head and sighed. "I really don't know what kind of thoughts your teacher instilled in you. He's either a pervert or a lunatic. Please don't insult my teacher." Kelluan was not angry and still spoke softly. "Isn't he a pervert?" I still remember when you took off your clothes the moment we met, wanting to offer your chastity to me, the savior of the world. Bai Xiaowen said sarcastically. Since then, I've been a little wary of you lunatics. Bai Xiaowen's expression changed slightly. She quickly took a few steps back and stood in front of Kelluan. What's wrong? Kelluan asked in surprise. There's a powerful aura approaching. Bai Xiaowen narrowed her eyes and looked at the sky in the northwest direction. There was a black dot that was rapidly enlarging. Is it the Thinker? Kelluan asked nervously. The Thinker isn't that reckless. Bai Xiaowen shook her head. It's the King of Pain, Sulfuron. Following Bai Xiaowen's words, a burst of crazy laughter echoed in the sky. Chapter 1760. The King of Pain, Sulfuron, was like an enlarged version of a black stick insect. 2 rows of appendages grew from its abdomen, and there were transparent insect wings on its back. Its 3 pairs of appendages each held a sickle. Christos! Let's see where you can run to this time. The rumbling of thunder reverberated in the air. Before the thunder had even died down, Sulfuron landed straight down. As though he was demonstrating his power, he charged straight at Bai Xiaowen's steed, the Frost Wyrm. Even without Bai Xiaowen's orders, the Frost Wyrm would have taken the initiative to meet the danger. It spread its wings and spat out a mouthful of cold dragon breath. Whoosh! 2 sharp black rays of light swept past, as though they could slice through space. The dragon breath was silently sliced apart, sliding past Sulfuron's insect body. At the same time, the Frost Wyrm's limbs were sliced apart. One of the 7 demon kings, King of Pain, Sulfuron. Which Kelluan's expression changed dramatically. Lord Christos, hurry up and teleport away. Don't worry about me. So long-winded. Bai Xiaowen shook his head. Instead, he took out the silver throne from his storage ring and sat on it. The silver throne slowly floated according to Bai Xiaowen's will, until Bai Xiaowen's gaze was level with Sulfuron's compound eyes. The Silver King's throne. Sulfuron's green compound eyes were about to turn red. Christos, you don't have the right to possess it. For some reason, Sulfuron did not speak in the demon language, but instead spoke in the common human language. If I don't have the right, then what about you? Bai Xiaowen laughed. An army deserter? A loser? Humph. Christos, you're just borrowing the power of the army. That's not your true ability. Right now, you don't even have a single soldier by your side. Even if you can summon them, you can only summon a limited number of creatures. You can't resist me at all. Sulfuron was full of confidence. I've already investigated carefully. This abandoned valley is very far away. It's impossible for your army to set up an ambush. I'm going to kill you, seize the Silver King's magic core, and become the ruler of the Western continent. He. Bai Xiaowen laughed. Sulfuron, you came at just the right time. I have already sent an ultimatum to the demons of the Western continent. Those who do not comply will be executed. You never came to the new city of Silver to pledge your loyalty to me. I can destroy you right here and now. In your dreams. Sulfuron roared and transformed into countless black shadows that charged towards Bai Xiaowen. All of a sudden, rays of light flashed and broke through the ground. Sulfuron's countless black shadows suddenly transformed back into one. He was a little bewildered as he looked at the pillars of light that broke out of the ground. What is this? I'll let you broaden your horizons. This is called a formation talisman. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, Now, you are already in my domain. Sulfuron, do you think I've been running around in circles in this mountain valley? I've already found what I'm looking for, but I don't want to leave just like that. I just want to fish for a bit. You have been waiting for me to appear this entire time? Sulfuron barked, but for some indescribable reason, he felt a sense of guilt. Actually, I'd rather wait for Rosher. But it's very obvious that he is much smarter than you. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, let me guess, Rosher has seen you before, right? Did he promise you anything? For example, if you kill me, you can inherit Isman's position. Sulfuron's compound eyes stared fixedly at Bai Xiaowen, but he could not conceal the shock in his heart. Idiot. If I were so easy to kill, why didn't the thinker do it himself? Do you think a piece of trash like you is worthy of being on equal footing with him? Bai Xiaowen suddenly clenched his fists. The power of the pillars of light suddenly converged, and the 8-gate golden immortal array was finally formed. This was only a small-scale immortal array that only used 8 talismans, and it was easy to set up. Even so, it was not easy for ordinary immortal cultivators to set up the 8-gate golden immortal array in a concealed manner. In order to be secretive, Bai Xiaowen had used his feet to transmit his true inner force, burying the talismans in the ground. If one did not have an expert-level spiritual power mastery, they might not have been able to do it. Sulfuron suddenly felt his body sink, as if a heavy object was pressing down on him. As a demon king who specialized in aerial combat, Sulfuron was most proud of his speed. But at this moment, he was under the pressure of the 8-gate golden immortal array, and his advantage in speed was greatly reduced. Damned fellow. Stop trying to be mysterious. Rosher already said that your physical strength is pitifully weak, and you are only relying on a strange ability to restrain creatures with divinity. Sulfuron shouted coldly. Rosher didn't want to bet his life with you because he has divinity. I'm not afraid of you. Sulfuron was, after all, one of the 7 demon kings, and he did not lose his composure because of Bai Xiaowen's words. Moreover, in Sulfuron's view, although the immortal array restricted him, it definitely also restricted Bai Xiaowen's space to dodge. This was no different from digging his own grave. This lousy magic array. Don't look down on me. Don't underestimate one of the 7 demon kings. Ah! Bone spikes suddenly shot out from Sulfuron's slender body, and he transformed from a stick insect into a praying mantis with blades all over his body. His aura also suddenly strengthened by more than 30%, and he broke free of the 8-gate golden immortal array's speed restriction to a certain extent. A black shadow spun like a whirlwind and shot toward Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen suddenly raised his hand and activated a large-scale deterrence. Sulfuron's body paused for a moment before returning to normal. This demon king had rich combat experience, and he instantly used his dark energy to break free from the deterrence's control. But this moment was enough for Bai Xiaowen. A thin bolt of lightning struck down from above. Primordial lightning. Sulfuron felt his skull tremble. He instinctively sensed the aura of death, and the moment Bai Xiaowen raised his hand, he flapped his insect wings with all his might. As everyone knew, insects could change directions extremely quickly and were very agile, just like flies, which were very lively in the summer. If one did not use tools, it would not be easy to swat them to death. Sulfuron's speed in the air was more than 1,000 times faster than a fly's. Bai Xiaowen's primordial lightning only hit 3 of his limbs on one side. With a swish, the 3 limbs slid down neatly as if they had been cut by a knife. No blood gushed out from the wound, and the green blood that had spurted out was completely evaporated by the pure electricity. Sulfuron let out a shocking roar of pain. This little injury is nothing compared to a demon's regenerative ability. Bai Xiaowen smiled. Your strength, how did it increase so much? Sulfuron roared. You clearly only have the strength of a demon lord. And a non-combat type at that. He finally regretted it, and flapped his insect wings, quickly fleeing outside. However, the 8 gates golden lock immortal formation was like an invisible cage that blocked his path. Idiot, why do you think I set up this immortal array? Bai Xiaowen sat on the silver throne, still smiling. Of course it's to prevent you from escaping. Chapter 1761. The moment he sat on the silver throne, Bai Xiaowen finally experienced the power of a divine tool. What did a level 10 increase in spiritual power mean? It meant that the power of Bai Xiaowen's spells had doubled. Moreover, there was also the Qi nurturing technique, which increased the power of the first attack. Fortunately, the Qi nurturing technique had nothing to do with the increase in spiritual power. If the additional power of the Qi nurturing technique was also increased by a level 10 increase in spiritual power, then Sulfuron would definitely be in an even worse state. Even now, Sulfuron had already lost a portion of his combat strength. 3 of his limbs had been chopped off from his shoulders, and there were even sizzling electric currents around his wounds. The stubborn electric currents burrowed into Sulfuron's body, simultaneously obstructing Sulfuron's regeneration of his limbs. Bai Xiaowen faced Sulfuron and opened his palm again. Primordial lightning, activate. Of course, at the same time, Bai Xiaowen's large-scale deterrence was also activated. Although Bai Xiaowen's strength had increased greatly, he was never one to underestimate his opponents. Sulfuron was a high-step king, after all, and his combat specialization was bound to be extremely powerful. Bai Xiaowen's meditation specialization was still far inferior to the others. It was very unrealistic to want to directly hit the other. He had to use a control technique to help and freeze Sulfuron's movements. If the primordial lightning could not hit the target, then what was the point of having its power doubled? But this time, Sulfuron's mouth emitted a faint green ripple, as though thousands of insects were buzzing at the same time. This scene was like being in the middle of a locust plague. The sound of insect wings flapping could be heard everywhere, converging into a great tide. Relying on the insect sound ripples, Sulfuron actually managed to endure Bai Xiaowen's deterrence and was not affected at all. There was not even a slight pause. In an instant, Sulfuron flew out. Bai Xiaowen's pupils contracted slightly, and he flicked his fingers. Extremely small bolts of lightning fell from the sky. This was not primordial lightning, but a castrated version of lightning strike that the self-dead Bone Demon Arcane Master had learned. Its specialty was that it was fast and consumed little energy. Bai Xiaowen had used a weaker version of Thunderbolt, so it was very difficult for him to deal any effective damage to Sulfuron. However, his intention was not to rely on the weakened version of the lightning strike to deal damage. Instead, he wanted to borrow the electric force of the weakened version of the lightning strike to temporarily paralyze Sulfuron's body, making it easier for him to connect the origin lightning. This was the physical paralysis method that Bai Xiaowen had promptly adopted after discovering that Sulfuron had a mental immunity skill, fully demonstrating his ability to adapt on the spot. However, Sulfuron was just that powerful. Withstanding the heavy pressure of the 8 Gates Immortal Lock formation, its black insect body continuously twisted and turned in the air, advancing in a roundabout manner. He had actually dodged all of the castrated lightning strikes by a hair's breadth. Because the speed was too fast, the lightning strike clearly had the visual effect of hitting the target, but in the next second, it became an afterimage. Die! Sulfuron roared angrily. The left side of its undamaged body swung its 3 sides, wanting to slice Bai Xiaowen into 4 pieces. With a whoosh, Bai Xiaowen's figure, along with the silver throne, disappeared without a trace. Only an illusory sword mark, flickering with a faint light, was left behind. The 3 sides had directly annihilated the illusory sword mark. Blink technique? Sulfuron relied on its powerful sensing ability to instantly capture Bai Xiaowen's position after blink, and once again charged over. At the level of Evolver, powerful spellcasters had no cooldown time when casting spells. However, this did not mean that they could be cast indefinitely. First of all, casting spells required a preparation process and casting movements. Secondly, after casting spells, spiritual power would flow through the miniature meridians, which also required a bit of time to recover. Forcefully casting spells could cause damage to the body. Therefore, the blink technique of high-level spellcasters could not be cast indefinitely. Even if the blink technique was not difficult, it would still be very difficult to cast it continuously. Sulfuron's calculations were not wrong. Although Bai Xiaowen's displacement Taoist spell was close to the proficient level and did not consume much energy, it still could not be cast more than 3 times in a row. It needed time to catch its breath. However, Bai Xiaowen was not purely a long-range spellcaster. He was a chi practitioner, an immoral cultivator who had mastered a branch of the ancient immoral arts of Huaxia, and was adept at borrowing the power of heaven and earth. In order to avoid Bai Xiaowen's lightning strike, Sulfuron charged into a subtle area. A strange feeling appeared. There was clearly air around him, but it seemed as if there were invisible walls pressing in from all sides, wanting to crush him into a meat patty. Bai Xiaowen was still sitting on the floating throne. You have already entered the 8-gate golden lock immoral formation's gate of pain. Roar! The black bone spurs on Sulfuron's body exploded. He once again ignited the evil energy in his body, releasing the restrictions on his body to the maximum. In this state, he could only hold on for less than a minute before his evil energy was exhausted. However, Sulfuron knew that he had no choice but to go all out. He had to kill Christos within a minute. Just as Sulfuron shattered the black bone spurs and ignited his evil energy to the maximum, he poured out energy in an attempt to resist the 8-gate golden lock immoral formation. However, the pressure of the 4 invisible walls disappeared without a trace in an instant, as if they had never existed. This instantaneous change made Sulfuron so uncomfortable that he wanted to vomit blood. Great emptiness. The 8-gate golden lock immoral formation gathered the wisdom of the ancient immoral cultivators of Huaxia. How could it compete with Sulfuron in brute force? In ancient Huaxia, regardless of whether it was cultivators or martial artists, most of them advocated skillful techniques. Even if one's cultivation was higher than the opponent's, they would rarely clash head-on with spiritual power. In terms of formations, the 8-gate golden lock immoral formation just happened to move from the gate of pain to the gate of view. One tension, one relaxation, one solid, one illusory. This was the law of the formation's operation. If Sulfuron could see through the changes in the formation's position, he would be able to find the opening or life gates from the view gate. He could definitely fight Bai Xiaowen, and at the very least, he would be able to escape from the immoral formation. However, he couldn't find it. He could only rely on his instincts and pounce at Bai Xiaowen once again. Bai Xiaowen's eye of evolution flashed past the trajectory of Sulfuron's skin, bones, flesh, and skin. He constantly flicked his fingers. The watered-down version of the lightning strike Taoist technique was launched again and again. Each strike forced Sulfuron to change his predetermined landing point, exhausting this secondary demon king's power. At the same time, the lightning strike Taoist technique was also driving Sulfuron closer to the most dangerous gate of the 8-gate golden lock immoral formation. Boom! Sulfuron crashed into the gate of death. At the same time, Bai Xiaowen's silver throne suddenly sank and landed on the ground. A vast amount of true inner force poured into the ground from Bai Xiaowen's feet. In reality, it poured into the core of the formation underground, where the core immortal talisman was located. In a split second, a sharp ray of light shot out from each of the 8 corners of the formation. It shot out at the speed of light and completely pierced through Sulfuron. However, at this moment, Sulfuron's body was still in a charging posture. In the next second, his demonic body was silently sliced into a pile of fragments. Chapter 1762. Bai Xiaowen waved his hand and removed the 8-gate golden lock immortal array. The array talisman of the 8-gate golden lock immortal array had lost its luster and was completely useless. This was an immortal talisman made from 2 large pieces of high-grade dark gold material. Unfortunately, it was only a one-time use item. However, it had buried a lesser demon king, so it was not a loss. Bai Xiaowen carefully put away the useless array talisman. Then, he stood up from the silver throne and put this divine artifact into his storage ring. Bai Xiaowen was very satisfied with the first battle of this divine artifact. He had only used the 3rd skill, the Seed of Origin. The other 2 skills had not been used yet, and Bai Xiaowen was already able to kill a high-grade king-level master. Moreover, Bai Xiaowen's true inner force was quite abundant. This was due to the Silver Throne's doubling of the recovery speed of his spiritual power. Witch Kelluan, who had been watching the battle, finally recovered from her shock. Christos. Were you confident that you could kill the King of Pain? Bai Xiaowen tilted his head and looked at her strangely. What else could it be? Why would I waste time here? It's to wait for him. You found the location of the demon god's skull long ago? Yes. Bai Xiaowen nodded. He glanced at the pieces of the demon king's corpse on the ground. After thinking for a while, he raised his hand and a ball of true inner force carried the pieces of the corpse into a large wooden barrel. This wooden barrel had been in Bai Xiaowen's storage bracelet all this time. It was originally used to store the demon blood. Now that it was used to store the pieces of the demon king's corpse, there was no need to dump the demon blood. After putting the large wooden barrel back into the bracelet, Bai Xiaowen walked a few dozen steps forward. He gently hooked his hand, and an inconspicuous rock on the wall to his left flew out of the crack and landed in Bai Xiaowen's palm. A world and a flower. The storage space corresponding to the throne's secret compartment incantation is in this rock. Bai Xiaowen could not help but be amazed by the wonders of spatial magic. This rock was essentially just an ordinary mountain rock, but it was the basis of a subspace. It was completely different from a real storage tool. Holding it, Bai Xiaowen could directly open its dependent space. Bai Xiaowen closed his eyes slightly and reached out to grab the air. In the next second, a stone platform was pulled out by him and fell to the ground with a boom. On the stone platform, there was a dark yellow skull. Perhaps it was an illusion, but the edges of the skull were flickering with traces of black and gold light. This stone platform was originally built to place skulls. In the entire storage space, there was only one machine and one bone. Bai Xiaowen thought that Isman might have placed some of his precious collections in this storage space, but unfortunately, he did not. This also proved how much Isman valued this demon god skull. None of the other collections could compare to it, so it must have been stored elsewhere. The first time he saw this bone, Bai Xiaowen could confirm that it was indeed a part of the death god's remains. The texture of this bone, as well as the divine power aura it contained, were exactly the same as the death god's hand bone he had seen before. Therefore, it should be called the death god's skull. After he obtained it, notifications from the spiritual world's rules came one after another. You have obtained a strange item, death god's skull. Unknown interference, data is in disorder. Do you want to submit the death god's skull? If you do so, you will receive 30,000 spirit crystals and purified divine power crystals x3. Compared to the hand bone, its value is 3 times higher. At that time, Rosher said that Tyrant Nibras had obtained the most bones, 2-leg bones. But now it seems that his 2-leg bones may not be as valuable as this skull. Silver King Isman is really not simple. In terms of difficulty, Isman, who commanded an army and liked war, was indeed the more difficult one to deal with among the 3 divine descendants. Of course, Bai Xiaowen would not submit it. On his face, the death god's face mask was already slightly hot. Obviously, he was very interested in this skull. Bai Xiaowen had a thought. The death god's face mask silently fell off Bai Xiaowen's face and covered the skull. Black fog quietly appeared and enveloped the skull. When the black fog disappeared, the skull also disappeared. When Kelowon saw this scene, his worldview was once again shocked. Isn't this the bone of a god? Shouldn't a god's bone be indestructible? Why was it devoured? Bai Xiaowen was in a good mood and said, to be precise, it's not devouring, but fusion. Kelowon thought of something and hurriedly asked, Lord Christos, is this skull the thing that can allow demons to be reborn indefinitely? Sort of. This skull is at least 1/3 of the credit. Now that the skull is gone, does that mean demons can't be reborn? Kelowon thought of this question. Bai Xiaowen looked at her strangely. Why do you say that the skull is gone? It's in here. He lightly shook the death god's face mask that was as thin as a cicada's wing and put it back on his face. Kelowon was a little disappointed, but he did not say anything. The moment he put on the death god's face mask, another sea of information rushed into Bai Xiaowen's mind. Beside the 2 occupation records, the small and thin black book was once again enveloped by the black fog. The sea of information was all absorbed by the black fog and absorbed by the little black book. In the end, the black fog was completely absorbed into the little black book like a whale sucking in water. When his sea of consciousness became clear again, Bai Xiaowen discovered that the little black book was actually one size bigger. Of course, compared to the other two occupation records, it was still much smaller. Bai Xiaowen tried to flip through it, but the black book remained motionless. Bai Xiaowen tried to inject his true qi to see if he could convert his true qi into Death God's power. According to common sense, Bai Xiaowen's Death God's power was at 10 out of 10. Since it was full, it would be useless no matter how much true qi he injected. But this time it was different. His true qi was quickly absorbed into the little black book and then it spat out extremely thin and black threads of energy. These threads of energy merged with the black energy ball around the little black book and the energy ball became a little bigger. There was a door. Bai Xiaowen's mind shook and he continued to feed it. Very quickly, the little black book's black energy ball was filled again. However, this time around, it was 10 times larger than before. Bai Xiaowen looked at his status panel. Bai Xiaowen race, humanoid/human race attributes, strength 163, agility 170, vitality 170, mental energy 191, spiritual energy, 4200, Death God's power, 100 out of 100 as expected. The Death God's power was no longer 10 points and had become a maximum of 100 points. He wondered if he could use the Death God's power to fight. Bai Xiaowen moved and the Death God's power actually flowed through his meridians. His heart was filled with surprise and joy. If he could use the Death God's power to use skills, just how strong would they be? Wouldn't they be stronger than the skills of a demigod? Of course, this was not the place to test it. Bai Xiaowen suppressed his joy. He summoned the Wrath Claw and sat on its back with Kelawan, choosing to return. Chapter 1763. New City of Silver. After Bai Xiaowen returned, the first thing he did was test the effects of the power of death. As expected, the power of death could be used by Bai Xiaowen like quintessential essence to cast skills like Lightning Strike. However, the Lightning Strike spell released through the power of death was a little special. It was pure black lightning. It was the complete opposite of the lightning in the natural world or the lightning released by quintessential essence. This pure black lightning was very powerful, but it lost the exorcism effect of the normal Lightning Strike spell. Instead, it had a special effect that was inclined towards darkness. It exuded an aura of aging and death. Bai Xiaowen understood that the so-called skills were actually the use of energy. The special effects of the skills depended on the attributes of the energy used. Of course, every energy had a suitable use, skill, and there were also skills that didn't match. For example, the power of death and the Lightning Strike spell were clearly not compatible. If there was a darkness-type spell, the power of death would be even stronger. Thinking of darkness-type spells, Bai Xiaowen suddenly thought of his undead summon creatures. Back then, Bai Xiaowen had chosen a candidate for each of the 4 leaders, the Bone, Corpse, Soul, and Sanguine. He injected 10 points of the power of death into them, allowing them to leap over the Dragon Gate and advance to a template. Furthermore, they became the leaders of the 4 races and possessed the unique skills of a leader. If Bai Xiaowen wanted to choose a new leader, such as re-electing the Sanguine leader, he would need to retract the power of death from the Sanguine overlord, Vladimir, and inject it into the new Sanguine leader. From this point of view, the position of the leader of the race was a little like an official position. There was a carrot and a hole. Bai Xiaowen couldn't appoint 2 officials with the same position at the same time. If he wanted to appoint a new official, he had to get the old one to step down. But now, Bai Xiaowen could freely use the power of death. Then, could he inject the power of death into his other subordinates to make them stronger without replacing the leader of the race? He did as he thought. Bai Xiaowen summoned the Shadow Assassin. This was one of the first batch of summoned creatures to follow him. The Shadow Assassin's self-awareness was only equivalent to a 5-year-old child. Its advantage was that it didn't have the willfulness of a child and was absolutely obedient. Bai Xiaowen tried to inject 10 points of death's power into the shadow assassin. The shadow assassin's body suddenly trembled. It fell to its knees, then fell to the ground and rolled around madly. Bai Xiaowen's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that he was mistaken? When the 4 heavenly kings were strengthened by the power of the Grim Reaper, they did not seem to be in such pain. With a thought, Bai Xiaowen extended a finger, wanting to retrieve the death god's power and relieve the shadow assassin's pain. Unexpectedly, the shadow assassin suddenly rolled away and spat out a stuttering sentence with difficulty. "No, I want." Bai Xiaowen's eyes widened. The shadow assassin had taken the initiative to object. Compared to her self-awareness of 3 to 5 years old, such an objection required a lot of courage. This also showed that the power of the Grim Reaper was of great significance to the shadow assassin. In the end, the shadow assassin made it through. She supported herself with her hands on the ground, her knees still weak as she panted heavily. Of course, this panting was only a natural reaction when the spiritual energy in her body was circulating wildly. It did not represent true breathing. Bai Xiaowen's eye of evolution swept over and suddenly discovered that the shadow assassin's aura was completely different from before. In terms of total spiritual energy, a level 16 shadow assassin had 2,200 points of spiritual energy. She was already at the commander level. Following that, Bai Xiaowen tried the priority and found that the shadow assassin had indeed advanced to the commander level, raising her profile by 1. As expected. This won't affect the 4 heavenly kings' position as the leaders of the tribe, but it can strengthen my other summoned creatures. Bai Xiaowen was somewhat excited. The shadow assassin knelt in front of Bai Xiaowen. "Master, I want it." Crack. The crystal ball fell to the ground and shattered into glass shards. Bai Xiaowen looked in the direction of the sound and saw Keloan, who had been brought back to the City of Silver, looking over in surprise. A drop of cold sweat appeared on the back of Bai Xiaowen's head. He had wanted to correct the shadow assassin's mistake just now. He was not a pervert. "Keloan, what are you doing here?" Bai Xiaowen coughed and assumed the air of a ruler. "I want to go back." Keloan had indeed come to bid farewell. "Got it. I'll send a team of soldiers to escort you back to the human borders." Seeing that Keloan still wanted to object, Bai Xiaowen waved his hand without hesitation. "It's settled then." Currently, only the human kingdom's territory was a safe zone. There were still a small number of low-intelligence wandering demons in other regions. Keloan's small body had the air of a leader, but he did not have much combat power. It was really not reassuring. "Yes." Keloan lowered his head and agreed. After Keloan left, Bai Xiaowen carried out a new round of experiments on the shadow assassin. As the shadow assassin had absorbed 10 points of death's power and was already in a state of extreme pain, Bai Xiaowen chose to accumulate it bit by bit to test the shadow assassin's absorption limit. In the end, the shadow assassin absorbed 17 points of death's power and reached its limit. The newly injected 18th point of death's power was unable to integrate into her spiritual energy system. It only wandered around her body and wreaked havoc. The shadow assassin seemed to have been inflicted with a negative status that caused her to constantly bleed. Bai Xiaowen hurriedly stopped and retracted the point of death's power. The shadow assassin's aura was fixed at the leader level. However, it was not considered weak among the leaders. Bai Xiaowen had an idea. He directly injected 17 points of death's power into the next elite summon creature, the skeleton warrior. Unexpectedly, the skeleton warrior didn't manage to hold on. It directly exploded into bone fragments that filled the sky. "Ah, sorry," Bai Xiaowen sighed. There were 2 possibilities. The first was that each summoned creature had a different tolerance limit. The skeleton warrior's tolerance limit was not as high as the shadow assassin's. The second possibility was that he injected 17 points of death's power in one go was too much. He should have done it step by step. He should have given 10 points first and accumulated them bit by bit. Bai Xiaowen continued with his experiments. After all, the summoned creatures in Death's appearance, including the 4 heavenly kings, would not truly die. Finally, Bai Xiaowen found out the pattern of injecting Death's power. To upgrade from normal to elite, it required 4 points of Death's power. For example, zombie dog, undead archer, etc., their tolerance was around 5 points. The best among them could withstand up to 7 points of Death's power and become rare elites. To upgrade from elite to leader, it required 10 points of Death's power. The tolerance of elite creatures was around 15 points. The strongest elite creature was actually the undead demon arcane master. It withstood 22 points of Death's power and became a genuine rare leader. Chapter 1764. The promotion from the leader template to the overlord template was more complicated and difficult. First of all, not all leaders could be promoted to overlord. According to Bai Xiaowen's estimation, one would need at least 50 points of Death God's power to evolve from a leader to a lord. This was different from the selection of leaders. At that time, the leaders of the 4 major races had yet to be decided. The 4 spots under Bai Xiaowen, the rookie Grim Reaper, were all empty. Therefore, he only needed 10 points of Grim Reaper's power to make the leaders of the 4 major races stand out. In terms of endurance, 10 points of Grim Reaper's power was nothing to them. But now, the slots for the 4 heavenly kings were full. The 4 shortcuts had all been taken. If one wanted to evolve from a leader to a lord, they would need to put in 10 times the effort. For example, the plague beast was nominally the butcher's mount. Nominally, it was because the butcher was more used to walking on 2 legs and never rode it. After absorbing 40 points of Death God's power, the plague beast exploded on the spot. Of course, it had no chance of becoming a lord. Another example was the Lich of the Bone race. His results were slightly better than the plague beast, but his limit was 45 points of Death God's power. Of course, the Lich was already a quasi-lord and was much stronger than the undead arcane master. Unfortunately, there was still a gap between him and a lord. The difference in priority could not be erased. There was bad news, but of course, there was also good news. After reviving, Bai Xiaowen tried to infuse it with Death God's power. After the Frost Dragon absorbed 50 points of Death God's power, it officially completed the evolution and became a lord. Its size doubled, and when it spread its wings, it really felt like it could cover the sky. Bai Xiaowen continued to infuse it. The Frost Dragon's best result was 56 points of Death God's power. At the side, the Lich and the Plague Behemoth looked on with envy. Bai Xiaowen could not be bothered to pay attention to these 2 fellows whose self-awareness was only 5 or 6 years old. Who could they blame for their own failure? Another thing worth mentioning was that the skeletal giant, which was originally a rare elite, was able to withstand the infusion of 60 points of Death God's power. It jumped 2 levels and became the 2nd Lord tier creature to be successfully promoted. This provided Bai Xiaowen with a new train of thought. The limits of a rare elite creature might not be weaker than a leader. Bai Xiaowen tried again. After all, 1 more overlord meant 1 more combat power available. The 3 soul catcher demonesses had tried, but they had failed. Demon Lady had tried, but it was hopeless. Bai Xiaowen suddenly thought of kits. No matter what, he had spent a great deal of effort to raise kits. The Blood God Sutra and Grand Monarch's Blood were all priceless treasures at the awakened level. However, kits had always been a disappointment, and was still stuck at the rare elite stage. Currently, Kits was in the Shal Plain, under the command of Vladimir, fighting against the Mongol army. He wondered if Vladimir had made things difficult for him. Bai Xiaowen didn't care too much, and immediately summoned Kits. Summoning across plains was naturally possible, but it would take a bit more time. Kits had a blank look on his face as he fell from the vortex in the sky. Before he landed, he didn't think to use his spiritual energy to fly or spread his bat wings, and he fell flat on his face. Fortunately, this bit of pain didn't matter to him. "Boss, something good happened?" Kits rubbed his hands and came over. Something good. Let's see if you can live up to expectations. You've improved? Bai Xiaowen discovered to his surprise that Kit's aura had become much stronger. He was already a leader. Heh. Kit smiled apologetically. Boss, I don't know what happened either. Last month, I had a fight with a Mongol army raiding team. After killing a Chiliarch, I broke through. Bai Xiaowen snorted. Although he was quite satisfied, he couldn't be nice to Kits. He had to be strict with him, or else this guy's tail would rise to the sky. How does Vladimir treat you? Bai Xiaowen asked. At first, his attitude was quite cold, and he didn't pay much attention to me. But after I broke through, old Vladimir became a lot more enthusiastic. He asked about my well-being, and I wasn't used to it, Kit said honestly. Bai Xiaowen smiled. He knew exactly what Vladimir was thinking. Kits had always been Bai Xiaowen's most trusted aide in the blood race. When they were choosing the leader of the race, Kits was too disappointing. He was only a rare elite and didn't meet the requirements, so the position of Heavenly King of the blood race was given to Vladimir. Now that Kits had broken through to become a leader, would Bai Xiaowen adjust the position of Heavenly King of the blood race? Would he take back Vladimir's power and bestow it on Kits? If Bai Xiaowen really did that, then Vladimir would have to serve under Kits, and the master-servant relationship would be reversed. The most important thing was that Bai Xiaowen had the power to kill them, and Vladimir had no ability to oppose him. No matter what decision he made, he could only obey. That was why Vladimir had tried to establish a relationship with Kits in advance, and changed his cold attitude from before. In fact, Bai Xiaowen didn't want to change. On one hand, changing the position of Heavenly King of the blood race meant that in the process of taking back Vladimir's power, the blood race slaves under his control would all die. A significant portion of them were important officials of the Song dynasty, and their sudden death would easily cause panic in the Song dynasty. On the other hand, Kits wasn't very suitable for the special position of Heavenly King of the blood race. Boss, look, I'm a leader now. Can I follow by your side? Kits said. Actually, I told old Vladimir that I have no interest in the position of Heavenly King of the blood race. How could it be as comfortable as following boss? He just doesn't believe. Bai Xiaowen smiled. Alright, I can let you follow by my side, but you have to pass a test. Test? Kits instinctively felt that something was wrong. Let's see your potential. Bai Xiaowen chuckled. He spat out a ball of pitch-black death power from his palm, and slammed it into Kit's chest. Kits had been tricked by Bai Xiaowen. He wasn't mentally prepared at all, and immediately welcomed the first wave of pain from the infusion of death power. He quickly grimaced in pain. This sort of pain from the infusion of power didn't affect the physical body, but rather the soul. Thus, all undead creatures couldn't avoid this sort of painful transformation process. Bai Xiaowen had just instilled 50 points of death power into Kits in one go. In any case, a one-time infusion was the same as an infusion in batches. Kit's endurance wouldn't increase just because they were slowly instilled in batches. Whether he became a dragon or a worm would depend on his own luck. Just as Kits was rolling around on the ground, Bai Xiaowen's 1,000-mile sound transmission talisman suddenly transmitted. Bai Xiaowen's heart thumped, and he immediately accepted the transmission. The talisman flickered with light, and the illusion of Han Su's upper body appeared. Old Han, why have you come? Bai Xiaowen was somewhat surprised. The 1,000-mile sound transmission talisman couldn't be used to send messages across planes. Since it could connect, it meant that Han Su had already arrived at the dark aeroplane. Chapter 1765. Long before he brought Kelawan to search for the demon god skull, Bai Xiaowen had already moved the resonant teleportation array between the Dark Age dimension and the White Phoenix territory to the new City of Silver. Therefore, Han Su had crossed over through the resonant teleportation array and appeared in the new City of Silver. However, the patrolling demon soldiers didn't understand, so they surrounded Han Su. Honest Man had no choice but to use the 1,000-mile voice transmission talisman to contact Bai Xiaowen. Soon, Bai Xiaowen and Han Su met. "Captain, aren't you developing too quickly?" Han Su said in surprise. Looking at the extravagant and grand buildings of the new City of Silver, as well as the teams of undead and demon soldiers, he had the illusion of transmigration. It was as if Bai Xiaowen hadn't been operating here for more than a month, but for many years. Bai Xiaowen waved his hand. "Part of it is luck. Let's not talk about this for now. Why are you here? Did something happen in the territory?" Han Su said, "There's something wrong with Star Alliance. Although the situation hasn't developed to a point where it's obviously disadvantageous to us, Sister Qiao and Jinmi all agree that we should keep you informed as soon as possible, lest you can't escape when the situation takes a turn for the worse." Bai Xiaowen said, "I'm fine on my side. Not only did I destroy the Heavenly Province's demon army base, but I also took over a large number of demon troops and killed a few demon kings. Now that the Western continent is under my control, as long as I have some backup plans, I can return in peace." "That's good." Han Su sighed and began to elaborate on the changes in Star Alliance over the past month. After Bai Xiaowen left, more than half a month passed peacefully. Then, there was a sudden rumor in Star Alliance that the Lord of Great Xia Feng, had disappeared. It was after this news spread that Heavenly Province's attitude towards the White Phoenix territory changed drastically. As the suzerain of White Stone Hill, a vassal territory, Qiao Rui had the right to lurk among the suzerains. The Lord of Heaven's mansion, Meng Chuan, madly tagged Bai Xiaowen in the Lord's group chat. He strongly condemned Bai Xiaowen's actions of interfering with the development of Heaven's mansion and gave Bai Xiaowen a 3-day deadline. Otherwise, it would be seen as a provocation to war. When Bai Xiaowen heard this, he was well aware of the situation. The Heavenly Province territory must have learned of Bai Xiaowen's actions when the Disaster King was destroyed. Afterwards, the Heavenly Province territory's resonant teleportation array was destroyed by Bai Xiaowen, and the Heavenly Province territory was unable to directly cut in. They could only wantonly denounce him in the Star Alliance, incompetent and furious. Fortunately, before Bai Xiaowen left, he reached an agreement with the 2 female territorial lords of Wuzhou and Rivendell. The 2 female territorial lords stood up and spoke on behalf of the White Phoenix territory, stating that Bai Xiaowen was not in the Star Alliance and that his territory should be protected. With the 2 territorial lords' words and Bai Xiaowen's absence in the Star Alliance, the Heavenly Province territory had to declare war according to convention. That was why the war did not break out. However, the Heavenly Province territory suppressed the White Phoenix territory in another way, and that was the secret realm of the dinosaur planet. Everyone knew that in the secret realm of the dinosaur planet, Bai Xiaowen had forcefully seized a spirit energy gathering point from the hands of Xiao Xing and Shiryu, the Golden Stone Lord, and constructed a teleportation gate. This was one of the few teleportation channels on the dinosaur planet and could be called the Golden Sea Route. Even the Heavenly Province territory did not have such a teleportation channel. The Heavenly Province territory borrowed the channel from other territories and sent a team of experts to the dinosaur planet to find the teleportation gate Bai Xiaowen had originally set up. This teleportation gate could not be destroyed. The team of experts simply surrounded the teleportation gate and prevented anyone from entering or leaving. With the Golden Sea Route broken, the people of the White Phoenix territory who wanted to go to the dinosaur planet to train and gather materials became a problem. Not to mention making deals with other territories in the future. Qiao Rui found the 2 territorial lords. Speaking of which, the 2 territorial lords were quite righteous. At the very least, their attitude was very positive. They questioned the Heavenly Province territory and the territorial lord group as to why they were doing this. They were no different from bandits. Meng Chuan's reason was very simple. This teleportation gate originally belonged to Shiryu, the Golden Stone Lord, but Bai Xiaowen had used a trick to seize the right to open it. Now, Lord Shiryu was willing to cooperate with him to take back the teleportation gate and develop the resources of the dinosaur planet together. The Golden Stone Lord, Shiryu, also stood out to prove this point. The White Phoenix territory naturally refuted that Bai Xiaowen had obtained the teleportation gate after defeating Shiryu. It was a fair competition, so who could they blame if their skills were inferior? However, Shiryu insisted that Bai Xiaowen had used a trick and colluded with Xiao Xing to seize the right to open the spirit energy gathering point. The biggest evidence was that Bai Xiaowen and Xiao Xing didn't compete at all. Xiao Xing automatically forfeited. Both sides had their own reasons. The main reason was that Bai Xiaowen wasn't here, so it was difficult to come to a conclusion. The territorial lords who were watching the show were also confused. If someone asked, wouldn't it be easier to find Xiao Xing, the lord of Xinggu, and ask him? Many people tagged Xiao Xing in the territorial lord group. However, Xiao Xing didn't appear to give any explanation. This was easy to understand. After all, Lord Xiafeng had disappeared, and the Great Xia territory had lost its backbone. As Xiafeng's subordinate, Xiao Xing had to be cautious and didn't want to get involved. Qiao Rui, Jin Mi, Li Shi, and the others analyzed the situation and concluded that Heavenly Province would make further moves. Bai Xiaowen hadn't returned yet, so they couldn't delay any longer. Luckily, the resonance teleportation formation had been opened, so they sent Han Su to find Bai Xiaowen and report this matter. When Bai Xiaowen heard this, he immediately asked, "Is there any explanation for Xiafeng's disappearance?" Han Su didn't know. Bai Xiaowen asked again, "Did any of our people get detained by Heavenly Province while they were training on the dinosaur planet?" Han Su shook his head. Currently, the territory has no plans to develop the dinosaur planet. We've been waiting for your return. Therefore, although Heavenly Province has surrounded our teleportation gate, they didn't catch any of our people. The reason why we know that Heavenly Province and Golden Stone Province have surrounded our teleportation gate was discovered by Li Shi. She wanted to go to the dinosaur planet and found something strange. Bai Xiaowen knew that the teleportation gate on the dinosaur planet also had vision. The boundary stone on the White Phoenix territory could see the enemy's blockade. Fortunately, this was the case. Otherwise, Li Shi would have crashed into the enemy's blockade. It would have been quite dangerous. The situation isn't optimistic. Bai Xiaowen came to a conclusion. Regardless of the reason, Xiafeng had always acted as a protective umbrella for the White Phoenix territory. His disappearance had directly caused the Sky Mansion territory to become restless. Qiao Rui and the others' judgment was very accurate. Currently, there were no signs of war in the Starlink Alliance, but the smell of gunpowder was getting stronger. "Captain, is it convenient for you to go back?" Han Su asked. "I definitely have to go back. However, I need to wait for 2 days and prepare some backup plans," Bai Xiaowen said. "You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."